there's like a universe creating God, but that doesn't mean that there is one. We don't actually really know what caused this universe to expand.
Okay.
So that's what I mean by that.
Okay. How should I go about this?
Pardon?
Okay, like, what do you think? Okay, so are you a materialist? Like, do you think like the only things that exist are like material things?
No, I'd say that, there are effects that we can observe as well, which, I don't know, aren't necessarily material, but we can't prove any of these metaphysical things, right? Like there's non-material things. We can't really demonstrate that all of those things exist. Like, for example, I can't disprove that Yahweh exists, right? Because I can't, apparently there's no way for me to really detect them. But in the same way, you can't really prove that Zeus doesn't exist. And you can't really prove that
No, I can't.
Quetzalcoatl doesn't exist. And all of these other thousands of gods, you can't really prove that they don't exist either. So why would I choose Yahweh, this one deity out of the thousands that people have invented over the course of human history?
Hey, brother, you're making a really big mistake. Just because there's a lot of religions doesn't mean they're all right.
No, that's correct.
You're
I'm
saying that
an
just because there's a lot of religions,
atheist.
therefore they're all wrong because there's more than one. Just say, okay, it was only one. That means the one that exists.
I'm not sure if you can hear us, but I think your connection might be a little frazzled. To be very clear, I don't think any of these other religions
because there's
are
a lot of
likely to be.
religions.
So, can you
You're
hear
saying
me?
just
Tom?
because there's a lot of religions, therefore there's no religion is wrong. Is that your
No.
logic here?
No,
Because there's a lot of religions.
No, I'm not sure you're understanding me. What I'm saying is that I've studied a lot of religions, and what I keep finding is that the evidence in support of them is not really any better than the evidence in support of any of the other religions either. Right? So when I studied Christianity further, right, like not only was I born into it, but I also did a lot of. Hold on, Matt, because I am responding to your question. So just hold on a sec. Not only was I born into it, but I also studied it, right? And I also went on to university to study it as part of my education degree, so I could then teach in religious schools as well, right? And the more I studied it, the less convincing it came to me, right? So it's not for a lack of trying to believe it. I can't help it. I don't believe that it's true. Right?
Okay,
I'm going to look at these other religions. Sorry?
I mean, I'm asking, how do you know whether a religion is true or not?
Well, I mean, I don't.
Like, what method do you use? Are you using science or something else?
Pardon?
Are you using science or something else? Or what are you using to say, okay, this religion is false, that religion is true, that religion might be false?
Sure, yeah. Look, we can use science to investigate some of the claims that various religions make. Otherwise, we can use things like logic and critical thinking to kind of assess the claims that are being made by any one religious group. Have you heard of epistemology before?
Yeah. Is that the study of knowledge?
Pretty much, yeah. So when you start studying epistemology and you start learning about various tools that you can use to analyze a claim, hey, thank you, Carissa, thank you so much. You start to realize that the kind of evidence in support of a claim is arguably what's most important. You're a legend, Carissa. Thank you so much. And the more I look at the evidence in support of Christianity and all of these other religions too, the less convinced I am that any of them are true. Hey, Carissa, single-handedly smashing the goal. What a legend.
No, I'm asking about your method though.
Sure. Well, I mean, you could just use logic.
Logic.
Sure, you could.
You haven't proven that logic existed yet, have you?
Or do you think that it doesn't?
No, 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 no. Because from my position, right, logic has to exist according to God.
Why?
Because logic requires a being. Rocks don't do logic. You need a being in order to do logic. But logic existed before any of us existed. So it can only be grounded in a transcendent being.
Well, as far as we can tell, logic is a system that we invented to
No, no,
help
no, no, no. You can't
ourselves
invent logic.
interrogate. Hey, so I wonder if you've noticed that when you're talking, I don't cut you off. I'd ask that you do the same.
Sorry, go ahead.
All right. Logic, as far as we can tell, is not something that, the universe handed us on a silver platter. It's a system that we devised for checking facts as we find them, as we, investigate reality. We didn't have logic passed on
Does
to us
logic
from the
require a
universe.
being
We
in the
developed
mind?
it. Pardon?
Like, do you need to have a mind and a being in order to discern logic?
As far as I can tell, yeah.
Yeah, okay, but was logic born with you when you were born,
No, I don't think
or
so.
did it precede you? Okay, so then where does logic exist?
Excuse me?
Because it wasn't born with you. Where is it?
What do you mean, where is it? It's like it's an abstract concept. We
No,
use...
you're saying logic exists, right? But logic existed before you existed. Where is it?
Yeah, in the same way that before I was aware of it, cars existed too,
No,
but
because
we
you just
developed
established that
cars.
logic exists. No, 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 no. Hold up.
I'm not sure.
Cars couldn't exist.
I'm not sure if maybe there's some lag or something. But when I haven't finished speaking yet, if you start speaking, I can't hear you because I'm still talking. Do you know what I mean?
All right, go ahead. My bad.
So if you want me to hear what you're saying, you got to wait for your turn. Do you get it?
Yeah, go ahead. Go ahead.
Yeah. So in the same way that, I don't think that, Rubik's Cubes just started existing when I was born. I think they probably already existed. But I think that it was a human who developed the Rubik's Cube. In the same way, I think that the laws of logic had been used by humans for thousands of years before I was born. But I think it was still humans that developed them.
No, that's a category mistake because Rubik's cubes are created using logic. Logic is what's in question right now.
It's not
The
a
logic
category
exists
error
before
because I don't
humans.
believe it's not a
The
category
logic
error
exists
because I
before
believe that logic
humans.
was developed by humans.
Whoa! So I can change the laws of logic right now if I wanted to.
No.
Okay, then they have to precede me. Then where are they?
The laws
They're
of
physical.
logic I should be clearer. The language that we use within logic, we use them to describe what we have currently observed as being universally true. It doesn't mean that the laws of logic will definitely work everywhere. Like maybe outside of the universe they work differently or something. I don't know. I don't think anyone knows. But I think that, as far as I can tell at least, the laws of logic seem universal, and for thousands of years, just about everyone else who's ever learned about them has observed them being universally applicable. So we continue using them. They're pretty reliable tools so far.
Yeah, but they require a being. If there are no beings, is there logic or not?
I don't know.
Does logic exist before humans or not?
Pardon?
Does logic exist before humans?
I don't know. I mean, I don't think so. I don't think the language that we use
Wait,
to
so there was no
describe the
logic
laws
before
of the
humans?
universe
Is that
existed.
where you go?
Pardon?
Is there logic before there was any human? There's no logic?
No, I don't think that that's likely to be true. I think that, species that existed before Homo sapiens probably used some form of logic, even if it was a bit faulty,
Like
in order
what?
to reason as best they could.
Like what? Like what?
Well, an animal might see a rustling in the bush and might jump to the conclusion that that rustling
No,
is
that's
some
instinct.
other
That's not
animal
logic,
that
brother.
intends to harm it. Again, Song, I'm not sure if you're aware that you're doing it, but you're starting sentences while I'm already in the middle of sentences, and it just doesn't work, man. So I think that animals, like, non-human animals have been doing this in a rudimentary way before humans started doing it, for sure, right? Like they might see a rustling in a bush and then kind of jump to the conclusion, or at least some of them would have jumped to the conclusion that that means there is an animal about to jump out at them and attack them. So they run. They've been using like a rudimentary form of logic that's, probably a bit flawed, really. From what I understand, that kind of flaw is called a type A logical error, like
Yeah, but
essentially a fundamental
sorry, go ahead, my
misattribution. But, obviously we've refined our system of logic. We're better at interpreting reality than we used to be.
No, my whole point is that logic exists outside of humans.
Pardon?
Logic exists outside of humans.
Perhaps, yeah. Like in animal species, I'd say they potentially use a rudimentary form of logic.
Yeah, but you only
Somewhat
need
flawed.
a being that has a mind and a soul to already even talk or even bicker about logic.
And we don't have evidence that that exists outside of
No,
sentient
you
life on
understand that?
Earth.
I don't think you guys are like
That's just a presupposition, man. Anyone can presuppose literally
everybody
anything.
got presupposition is who can justify them. You can't
Pardon?
justify yours.
Sure. I mean, as far as I can tell, given my experience from birth until now, what appears to me to be most consistent is the laws of logic as I've understood them to have been developed so far. I've not yet observed
No, you
the
don't
laws of
develop the
logic
laws of
as
logic.
being song. You just did it again. It literally just slows us down when you do it. I've never observed the laws of logic not working, so I keep using them.
Yeah, because they're a matter of fact. We don't create them.
We
We discover them.
we
The
didn't
laws of
find
like
them
we don't
inscribed.
create them, right?
Again, like I said, man, I don't think we've got any evidence that we found them written in the stars or anything. I think that through trial and
Or
error,
if
really
even in the
smart
word,
song.
hold up.
You're doing it again, man. From what I can tell, humans developed their understanding of logic basically through trial and error. We just kept trying stuff out and seeing what worked, and we've landed on the 3, sometimes 4 laws of logic that we tend to learn in, like, epistemology 101. You could just jump to the conclusion that there's some kind of conscious entity that lives outside of this universe that invented them if you want to, but that's just a presupposition. That's, again, anyone can presuppose anything. I'm not claiming to know that there's no God out there. I'm just saying I don't see the need to jump to the conclusion that there is one.
No, the impossibility of the contrary is the reason why there is a God. Like you can't prove the contrary.
Well, you can't prove your
Everything that
presupposition.
you're using right now
Thank you,
can only be
Jeepers.
grounded. Go ahead. Okay. All of the things that you're using right now, like logic, like language, everything, truth. You're presupposing that truth exists for you to even come to conclusion of everything. But that
I'm
can
not
only be
presupposing that
grounded
all
in the
truth
existence of a
exists.
being.
The only thing that I am like close to absolute certainty of is that I'm experiencing. That's it. This could be a simulation,
That's
this could
not
be a dream, this
justification,
could be a
though.
hallucination,
Don't
this could
justify anything.
be, again, song, when I'm talking, when you're talking, if someone else starts talking, can you hear them? Do you expect me to be able to hear you when I'm already talking? I don't know why you do that. I, again, only claim to be anything near certain of anything regarding the fact that I am experiencing. I don't know exactly what I'm experiencing. It could be a simulation, a dream, a hallucination, a psychotic break. It could be anything. I'm convinced that it's more likely that this is all reality and that I'm sharing reality with you. But again, I can't demonstrate that I'm not dreaming beyond a shadow of a doubt. I can't demonstrate that I'm not in a simulation beyond a shadow of a doubt. But that's honestly the only thing that I even close to presuppose at all, is that I am experiencing. Everything else is up for debate, man.
So an argument for ignorance, right? Is that it? Like, because you don't know, that means there's no God.
Well, like I said, I'm an agnostic atheist. I'm not claiming to know that there's no God, man. Do you understand? Like, I'm not making a positive claim that there is no God. I'm saying, of all the gods that I've ever had anyone tell me about, I'm not convinced that they exist. They might exist, but the evidence is not compelling. I mean, is there a particular God that you think I should think is real?
Wait, no, because you just presuppose that there's evidence. What's your method for determining what would be evidence? You see how you just did that? You just asserted that.
I'm just
You
asking
just sneaked
you.
that in like you didn't know that you didn't do that. What's evidence?
I'm
What would
asking
be
you,
evidence for
son.
that?
I'm asking you.
No,
Is
no, no. But what's the
there a
method
God?
that you would use
Again, dude,
for evidence?
if I'm already talking and you start, I can't hear you because I'm already talking. It's just silly. If there is a God that you believe in and you think I should believe in it too, can you like tell me which God it is and like what evidence you think there is? And
Yeah, but okay, what method would you want me to use to prove that God exists? You want me to use science?
I don't know. You can do that if you want.
You can't prove God with science. Science only deal with the physical.
Sure. I mean, do you think that we can demonstrate? You know
Do
that
you think the only thing that exists, or like the only thing that you can prove with science is that it?
I have no idea. I mean, I
Yeah,
don't see that I
that
should
is literally
act
your
as though.
problem.
Well, hold on. I don't see that I should act as though every single claim that anyone ever makes up is true, right? Like, if I can't investigate it scientifically, I don't see why I should be expected to behave like it's true.
Okay, prove the language exists right now because you're using it right now with science.
Prove that it exists.
Yeah, because you say you can't.
I think that really the word proof is not necessarily helpful. I think proof only really occurs in like mathematics, doesn't it? Really, like it's a mathematic term, but like,
No.
can
Forget
I
that. You said
demonstrate to
science, right?
myself? Can I demonstrate to myself that language exists? Yeah, as far as I'm concerned, I can. Yeah, because I'm using the noises that I've learned to mean certain things in order to respond to the noises that you've learned to use in order to mean certain things. And we seem to have a pretty well
Well,
understood
what
back
about
and
other
forth going
languages?
on. So I don't see any good reasons to think that language doesn't exist.
I know we're speaking the same language. If there's other languages, what's the difference between Chinese and English?
Sure, the way that the sounds are understood by the people speaking the language.
Yeah, so meaning, where does meaning exist then?
I think meaning is socially constructed, really.
So meaning doesn't exist?
No, it does exist. It's just socially constructed.
Wait, so it's subjective? Doesn't exist?
Things that are subjective are not necessarily non-existent. That doesn't make any sense. Like it's
No,
subjective
if
to me.
something's subjective, then
Hold on, man.
I'm making it up.
Hold on, man. So if you struggle with subjectivity and objectivity, like I understand, but just because it's subjectively true to me that pineapple tastes good on pizza, and to other people, it's subjectively true to them that pineapple doesn't taste good on pizza. That doesn't mean that pineapple objectively does or doesn't taste good on pizza. It's a matter of opinion, right? Like these things are experienced subjectively. I don't understand what all of the noises that constitute the Chinese language mean. I don't understand what all of those noises mean.
No, because like,
Right? But that doesn't mean that people who do understand that system of sounds don't mean anything when they're using that language. It's a socially constructed system, just like the system that you and I are using. In fact, you and I are probably speaking slightly different languages, right? Because your vocabulary is probably a little bit different, at the very least, to my vocabulary. So technically, we both speak, although we both say we speak English, we've probably learned slightly different aspects of the language. There's just a whole bunch of overlap that we can share with each other.
Okay. I think the problem that you have is that with most atheists, I know you're trying to save yourself by saying you're agnostic atheist, right? You're trying to save yourself with that. But the problem that most atheists have, they have concept word fallacies. You know what a concept word fallacy is? Like they
Can you tell me
confuse
what you
words.
think?
No,
Can
no, no.
you
Hold
tell
up.
me,
Let
can
me
you tell me
finish.
what you think
Please
I'm
let me finish.
saving myself from?
No, no, no. No, no, no. You guys don't know what you guys are on. You confuse words. What words are referring to? The actual
What
thing that is
I'm
called.
interested in
Now,
this.
for
I'm
example, let me
interested
give
in
you
this
an
word.
example. I'll give you an example, right? Like
I'm
the word
interested in the
tree.
word that you just used,
No,
son.
no,
Like,
no. The word tree
what
is
am
not identical to the
what
actual
am I
thing that
saving
is a
myself
tree.
from?
That's
Son,
why you can't
again,
understand
man,
God. You
I
confuse
can't
those
hear
two things.
you. Again, son, I can't hear you when I'm already talking, son. So when I'm saving myself
No, I
from
thought you were
something,
done speaking. That's why I started speaking.
what do you think I'm trying to save myself from?
Okay. Okay. From this side of the debate, you guys are just running from God. That's it. You're just running.
If a
There's no
Hindu said,
intellectual position that you can take against God. There's not that. Like, it's not an intellectual problem for you guys.
if a Hindu came to you and
It's not an
said,
intellectual problem. You guys are just running from God.
You're doing it again, man. I can't hear you if I'm already talking. Just like, do you believe that? Or is that something you don't believe?
No, that's literally the matter of fact. You guys are just
No,
running
no,
from
no,
God.
no. I'm asking
There's
you a
no
question
smart
before we
position you
keep
can take
going.
against God.
If someone is already talking and you start talking in the middle of when they're talking, do you think they can hear you?
But I just let you spoke for the last 2 minutes or something.
That's not what my question was, Song. If someone is already talking
Okay,
and
let's
then
not
you
have a meta
start talking,
conversation.
so just like you did it again just now, right? So I don't know what you just said because I was already making noises, and then you started adding noises, and now I don't know what you were saying. Okay, just hold on a sec. Do you think that when someone is already talking, do you think they'll be able to hear you if you just start talking in the middle of their sentence?
No,
Okay, so why do you keep doing that?
because you say things that are like that don't make sense in the middle of your sentence.
So
I have
you
to cut
think
you off.
so you think that it's going to help if you
Yeah,
start making noise
I
that
don't
no
wanna.
one can understand?
I'm trying to save you. That's what I'm saying.
I understand that that's probably what you believe because you're a Christian, but that's just not how conversation works. Like, if you're talking and I just start making noises in the middle of your sentence, do you think either of us can hear anything that's happening then, or is it just unintelligible noise?
Okay, Daniel, you're right on this one. I keep saying,
Okay.
okay, sorry, go on. I'm sorry. Go
Okay.
on.
So can you tell me what you think I'm saving myself from by labeling myself an agnostic? You think I'm running from God?
Yeah, you're trying to worship yourself. That's what I'm trying to say.
No.
Without
So
God, what else do you have to worship? You're gonna worship yourself and
no,
your
I don't
desires. That's
worship
it.
anything.
Oh, you think so? That's called
I
pride.
don't worship anything.
You know what
No.
that's called? That's called pride. You don't even know it.
So not worshipping something is called pride.
No, no, you just don't know it yet. You just don't know it yet.
If a
You just don't
Hindu
know it.
came to you, Song,
You just don't know it yet. Like humility. Like you don't
Song,
have virtues
I
in your
just started a
world.
sentence,
Virtues don't
dude.
exist in your world.
I just
There's no
started a
such thing as
sentence, man.
virtues. You don't have any virtues.
I just started a sentence, buddy. You're just gonna have to wait a sec. If someone from any other religious background came to you and said, "You're just running from my God by telling yourself that you're a Christian," do you think
No,
that
no, 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 no,
you
no.
think that
Oh
makes
my.
sense?
Come on, this is not honest, brother. This is not honest. We're debating God. Not
Look, I don't mind if you don't look, Song. I don't mind if you don't like the question I'm asking you, but that's the current question. If someone from a different religious background came to you and said, "You're just running from Yahweh by telling yourself you're a Hindu," do you think that that's a particularly compelling argument?
no, I know this is a goalpost move. Like you're shifting the goalpost. We're debating if God exists or not which God exists. So I know you're just
No,
hiding
no, this
behind.
is this is not a
No, no,
goalpost
no.
move. I'm asking you. I
It is.
asked you what you think I'm saving myself from by calling myself agnostic, and you said you think I'm saving. I'm trying to save myself from what, like punishment from Yahweh, like I'm running from Yahweh or something. And then I said, if someone else used the same argument to you from a different religious perspective, do you think that that would be a particularly compelling argument for you?
No, because without God, everything goes with that.
That's a non sequitur.
There's
That
no
doesn't
right or
answer my
wrong without
question at
God.
all. I'm talking
No,
about
no, no, no.
someone who
Because
believes in a different God to you, using the same argument that you just used on me, but on you. Do you think it makes sense?
brother, you don't realize that the very like without God, none of this is relevant.
So
We're
are you're not,
debating
you don't want
the
to
existence
answer,
of God, not which God. If you want to debate
you
which
don't want to
God
answer my
exists, then you have to
question?
accept God exists first.
Okay, if you don't want to
No,
answer
no,
my
you have to.
question,
You
that's
have to
okay.
accept.
I can just move on to someone else. There's other people in the queue. That's fine.
No, do you want to debate which God exists, or do you want to deny that there's no God?
I just want conversation,
If you want to
honestly. I'm
debate,
not necessarily here for debate or any, I prefer conversation, but I don't.
no, because that's a goalpost move. You're trying to shift the goalpost.
No, I'm responding to the words that you said. I'm not moving the goal. I'm
Yeah, no, you're
literally.
saying
I'm
there's
so
no God, right? So I'm responding to that.
song again.
Do you want to
You're
debate if
doing
there's a
that.
Christian God or not?
Song, you're doing that
I can do
thing.
that.
Song, you're doing that thing again where you start making noise in the middle of someone else's noises, and it just makes more noise. Song, I am following your lead. I'm only responding to things that you are bringing up. So if you don't want to respond to that question that I just asked you, which is in direct response to something that you just accused me of, then that's okay, but I'm just going to move on to the next person. So do you want to answer my question, or do you want to try again another time?
Okay, lay that out again. I want to hear that. What's the question?
Okay, sure. So you accused me of trying to like save myself by essentially just acknowledging my agnosticism. I'm just acknowledging my agnosticism, but you think that I'm deliberately doing it to like save myself or something. And then you said, well, yeah, you're basically running from Yahweh. And I said, no, I literally I don't even think Yahweh exists, right? And then I asked you if someone from a different religious background, like let's say an ancient Mayan, they said, you're running from Quetzalcoatl by saying that you're a Christian. You're just denying Quetzalcoatl because you're a Christian. Do you think that that makes sense for them to do that? Or is that just like pure bias on their behalf?
No, because I quoted you with the God question. So now you're trying to assert, okay, wait, which God exists? You completely forgot what we were arguing about before.
You've not. Okay,
You're not trying to.
I'm going to try
You're not
someone
trying to
else then
address
because
what
I'm not
happened.
sure. I'm not sure we're on the same
Come
page.
on, bro.
It's
You're
not really
running.
making sense. But perhaps we'll try another time. All right.
All right. Thanks, man.
All good. See ya. Thanks for being here, everyone. Thanks for almost 20K likes as well. Keep it coming. Notice that fresh background. I'm going off a different device to the one that I normally go off of. I've got a new microphone too, but I didn't charge it properly. I thought I'd charged it, but it's not charged. So thanks for being here. Help me boost the stream. Keep the taps coming. And we will get as many people in here as possible, hopefully. And then I'll get a nicer background going at some point too, hopefully. When am I going to repent? I mean, I don't know why I should repent in the first place, so probably never. If you give me a reason to repent, I probably will. The stick microphone will be back. Don't worry. Don't sweat. Let's try someone else. Keep it coming, everyone. Thank you so much. Ishan, how you doing?
Hello?
Hello. Can you hear me?
Yes, can you hear me?
Awesome. Yeah, I can hear you. What's up?
Hello, yeah, it's my first time joining a live.
Yeah, sure thing.
Yeah. So I'm Catholic, and I think I've seen a couple of your lives, and I was like, I just kind of want to like have someone who can, I guess, like talk to from like a different perspective, and like I want to like try and find what the blind spots are, I guess, in my beliefs and investigate that myself,
Okay,
I
sure.
guess.
So are you
Yeah.
Christian? Is that
Yeah. So my mom is Catholic and my dad is, well, he's an atheist now, I guess.
okay?
So I was raised in that kind of environment.
Okay.
Yeah, I would say that I try to be a practicing Catholic. I don't know how good I am at that, but yeah,
Okay. So you'd say you're a Catholic.
yeah.
Okay. Well, why is that exactly? Is it just because you were kind of raised in it, or are you honestly convinced that it's true because of evidence you've seen or something?
Yeah, I think it's a bit of both. Like obviously I was raised as a Catholic, but also had the presence of like an atheist or agnostic. Well, he identified as an agnostic at first, and then now he kind of says he's more like leaning towards an atheist. But I had that was like my dad. So I think growing up, I always was not forced to believe anything. Like we went to church, like me and my family, and like I wanted to investigate why I believe these things as well, right? And I'd have conversations with my dad about why he doesn't believe, and then try and rationalize my belief. And I think at the moment I'm still, I don't know if convinced is the right word, but I think that what I believe is more in line with what I observe in reality. I guess I think it's a rational way to see how the world works, like both from like certain arguments that people might make, and I guess like some degree of my own personal experience as well.
Okay, got it. Well, regarding personal experience, because we can come back to the whole, religion being a quote unquote rational worldview. When it comes to personal experience, do you think that a Hindu's personal experiences would prove that Hinduism is real?
Uh, I think it would be evidence to some degree for that person, and it could make it rational for that person to believe because of their personal experience, but I wouldn't say that necessarily is enough to prove that Hinduism itself is true. But it could prove something like the existence of God, right? To some extent, like you could be praying as a Hindu or as like a Catholic or as a Muslim or whatever, and you may still receive some, let's say, divine experience, and that could, even if it might not be direct evidence of the existence of your religion per se, it could be evidence towards, or at least a reason to believe in the existence of a god, if that makes sense.
Sure, like reason to believe, totally. If I could say the same thing, about children. Hey, honk honk, sir. Thank you so much. I could say the same thing about the gift tag on a kid's Christmas present saying "from Santa," right? Like that's evidence
Yep.
that Santa made the toy and delivered it to that child's home, right? It's not very good evidence.
Yeah, I would agree with that.
Yeah, it's not very good evidence. It certainly doesn't mean that Santa's real, but to the child, it's pretty convincing evidence, right? Until they, grow up and get a bit more information, they have a bit more context, and they realize that it's actually essentially planted evidence, right? I mean, in the same sense, I feel that essentially everyone's personal experience feels like pretty good evidence of just about everything that they believe, right? And that's why we have to kind of zoom out from our own perspective, right? We have to use something like science to actively try to account for our cognitive biases, so we can see what's more likely to be objectively true compared to other claims, right?
Yeah.
So it sounds like we're mostly on the same page regarding personal experience. It's evidence, but it's not good evidence, right?
I would still say that there's some level of like levels between what could be good personal evidence and maybe not so good personal evidence. Like I don't think the Santa analogy, well, I mean, it works for the in the sense that it's not good evidence for Santa, but I don't think that you can equate that to every single religious experience there is out there, because I think there are other like plausible explanations, quite easy explanations for a gift having this is from Santa. Like, I think most people, if you were to ask like any adult, they would say, yeah, your parents wrote that. So that's evidence that provides a more reasonable alternative explanation. Whereas I think, well, I think you need to examine each religious, like different people have different experiences in religion, but I think that there's a bit more to unpack in like a different religious experiences. So if maybe, for instance, someone is praying and they get like in a troubled time and they get an immense sense of peace, for instance, I don't think that there is an immediately plausible alternative explanation that means you should immediately discount that personal experience. Of course, there could be others where you could be convincing yourself that God exists and you're kind of like tricking yourself almost without realizing it. But I do think that there's at least a bit more plausibility to that compared to the Santa analogy.
I think it's about as plausible, to be honest, because of the nature of the claim. Ultimately, Santa is claimed to have all of these, let's say, miraculous powers, right? He can transverse the entire planet within the space of a single night, reaching every household containing a well-behaved child along the way, according to the mythology, right? According to the claim. I'd say that's, pretty miraculous. I don't think it's likely to be true. You can say the same about just about every religious or mythological figure ever written about, right? Like Jesus of Nazareth, number one, having existed is up for debate, but Jesus of Nazareth, walking on the surface of liquid water, or like being crucified until dead and then entombed for 3 days and then coming back to life and essentially floating up into the sky to rejoin Yahweh for eternity. Yeah. Those are comparable claims in the sense that they're essentially miraculous claims. They require like a superpower, which no one can demonstrate.
Sorry, you keep going.
Sure, like they're stories that no one can substantiate, and they're just two of thousands, if not millions, of stories about different characters that people have invented and written about and told their kids about for thousands of years. I don't see why someone's personal experience of any one of these entities or deities is any more likely to be true than anyone else's. Right? Like if someone prays to Jesus, I'll give you an example. When I was younger, my mum, whenever we'd go to the shopping centre, she would always pray. If it was really busy, she would always pray that God would give us a parking spot.
Yeah,
and obviously, you drive around the parking spot for long enough, you find a parking spot, right? But if a Hindu were to do the same thing, they would have prayed to Ganesha or something, but Ganesha would give them a parking spot. You and I know perfectly well that if they're just driving around the parking lot for long enough, they're going to find a parking spot as well. And if an atheist were to do the same thing, turn up to a parking lot, but not pray, if they drive around long enough, they're going to find a parking spot too. So the prayer makes no difference. It's just in the mind of the believer, it feels like it's evidence that their God is listening to them and helping them in the physical world. Right?
Yeah.
I can't think of an example that anyone has ever given me of like a deity helping them in the material world, that there isn't like an equivalent of in some other religion.
Yeah. Are you done, or can I?
Yeah, no, go for it.
Yeah. Sorry, I know in the last guest you had, there was a lot of talking over each other, so I just want to make sure I don't do that.
I very much appreciate it, man.
Yeah. So, okay, there's a lot to unpack here. I would think, okay, when I talk about personal experience, I would say that it is a good reason for it can be a good reason for an individual to believe, but I would not necessarily say that my personal experience should convince you. I mean, it's something you could consider, but I won't say, oh, I've experienced this, so therefore you should believe in Jesus or you should believe in Hinduism or whatever. But I think it provides at least a somewhat rational grounding for an individual to believe.
I think you can feel like it is.
About other things as well, I would say.
That sorry, I don't mean to cut you off. I thought you might have finished.
Yeah, so you can.
I think my response to that would be that it can certainly feel like a good reason, especially if that person has never heard of things like cognitive bias before, or logical fallacy, or
sure.
Or they've never heard of any of the number of psychological effects that we've been learning about since the inception of psychology. The placebo effect, the Rosenthal effect, etc., etc.
Yeah,
I think that once you learn enough about these things, you start to realize that there are rational explanations for why things pan out the way that they pan out, independent of one's own religious beliefs.
Okay, so that's not incorrect, and I still think that you have to be aware of those things if you want to truly examine what your personal beliefs are. But sorry, we can go back to this, but I want to go back to what you said about like comparing Santa Claus and Jesus, because I agree that in the sense broadly that they are both miraculous events, but I do think that those are not like completely identical, because I would say that the you need some degree of evidence, right, to believe a miraculous event to support something supernatural. And I would say that even if you aren't convinced of the divinity of Jesus, I would say that at the very least, it's not very contentious to say that there is more evidence for the divinity of Jesus as compared to Santa Claus. Because for Santa Claus, like let's say the miraculous or supernatural things that we subscribe to how he's normally described in like his mythology or whatever, is that he flies around in a sled. He goes to different houses within one night. He lives on the North Pole. So we can look at the North Pole and we can see that there's no observable location in which Santa is located. We can track the entirety of the globe, and we've never seen a man dressed as Santa flying on a ski with reindeer, going around in one night. There aren't massive reports of presence within houses that are unaccounted for by children. Because if Santa did exist, I would assume that an evidence that points toward that would be that we would see these things, or even if we don't, that at the very least we would have, I don't know, mass hysteria reports of children receiving gifts that they'd never, they never asked for and their parents had never bought for them. So I would say that the absence of these things would at least demonstrate that Santa does not exist.
I'd say the same for God.
Yep. So
and by the same token, I could also say something like, well, Santa just has invisibility powers. No, Santa just he can make himself immaterial as well, so you can't even touch him when he's there. He moves between dimensions. And you could say things like he doesn't give off any heat either, so you can't pick him up with infrared cameras either. Right? It's kind of the same with a deity. You can just keep inventing ways that you can't interact with them whenever someone asks for a way that they can interact with them. And then say, well, just because you can't interact with it in any way doesn't mean that it doesn't exist. And to that I would say, well, what's the difference between something that you cannot demonstrate exists in any way and that thing just not actually existing?
Yeah, so I would agree with that. But I would also say that one that doesn't account for one of the main aspects which we would expect to see if Santa exists, which would be presents that parents had not bought. But if we can shift, like comparing it to Jesus, that I mean, I think most scholars do accept at least that he was a real person. Obviously, there's a lot of questions around his divinity, but I would say that the fact that there are at least eyewitnesses and people who are willing to, like the disciples who are willing to go out into the world preaching with great belief not the existence, sorry, preaching with great belief the divinity of Jesus and his and the Christian message, and the fact that they were willing to die in very gruesome ways for this show that they at least had sincere belief in what they were going out preaching. And I think that that's good evidence for the miracles. You can disagree with that, but I would at least say, like, would you at least accept that that's better evidence than for someone like Santa?
No, not really, because number one, the eyewitness accounts don't actually exist. The Gospels are not eyewitness accounts. In fact, the earliest Gospel is not an eyewitness account, and the later Gospels are largely forgeries of that first Gospel, and they change the story as they go. There's one, I think it's in Paul, he says that there were 500 people who saw the resurrection, which contradicts the Gospels, number one. And number two, that's one person claiming that there were 500 people there. That's not 500 accounts. That's one account claiming that there were 500 people there. That's like if I say, I went on a fishing trip last weekend. I caught this fish. It was 3 meters long, man. It was crazy. If you don't believe me, there was like another 100 people there who saw it. I can't give you any of their names, and I don't know where they are, but they were there. They saw it. Believe me. Like it doesn't make any sense to believe that, right?
Yeah.
So the accounts are not reliable. But to go back to the other argument that you raised, that there were people who preached about him. There have been people who have preached all kinds of cults and other religions as well. And surely you recognize that the fact that a cult leader can develop a following doesn't mean that their claims are true, right? In the same way, there have been martyrs for many belief systems as well. Think about every jihadist that's ever flown a plane into a building. That doesn't mean that Islam is true, right? Think about all the people, like the hundreds of people, including children, that drank the cyanide-laced Flavor Aid in Jonestown. That doesn't mean that Jim Jones was the Messiah. It just means that all the people of Jonestown believed he was, right? So developing a following, and even a following that is so convinced that they've found the Messiah, that doesn't mean that they have. This has been happening throughout history. Cults pop up. Some of them get really popular and they last a long time. They turn into world religions. Look at Islam. Look at Christianity, in my opinion. Look at Buddhism. Not technically a religion, but we can't demonstrate that Siddhartha Gautama existed either. We can't prove beyond a shadow of a doubt that Muhammad was a figment of fiction either, right? But even if they did exist, if their followings believed that they really were who they said they were, that doesn't mean that they were. This is how cults start.
Yeah. Well, that's a lot to. Let me try and remember everything. So I think you said something about Paul, right? Yeah. I think I would admit that I'm not too well versed in. I'm trying to learn more and like study more about like how the Bible was like compiled and like the early history of the church and things like that. I think what was specifically said, and I might be wrong, in that scripture was that Paul didn't say specifically that 500 people witnessed the resurrection like in one moment. I think it was just that over a period of time when Jesus had resurrected he appeared to 500 people. I think it's a slight difference, but I wouldn't say that would
Even
completely
if that's
invalidate it.
Sorry, I thought you'd finished.
Yeah,
But
yeah,
even if
and
that
I
is
think.
sorry.
Sorry, yeah.
No, you go, man. You go.
And I don't think the fact that they are all that they're not named necessarily invalidates it. For instance, I could be in a lecture theater, right? Like a uni lecture theater that fits 500 people, and I can say, oh, I can't. I'm trying to think of something crazy that would have happened that I would have come out of. Let's say the lecturer took off his shirt and took off his pants or something like that. Like I'm telling the story to someone else, and he's like, "I don't believe you." I'm like, "Well, there's 500 other people in the lecture theater who saw it. Like let's say the lecture theater was full." And he's like, "Who are they?" I'm like, "I don't know. This is the first time I've been to this school. I don't know who anyone else was in that lecture theater." But the fact that I said there were 500 people who witnessed it would still be correct, even if I can't name them.
Yeah, but you can't demonstrate that they existed.
But I would
Right?
still be correct.
You were there. But the thing is that you weren't there when Jesus was allegedly wandering around ancient Palestine. You weren't there. You're taking someone else's word for it. Like, do you think that Muhammad split the moon in half?
No.
Well, the Quran says that he did. So
Yes.
why don't you believe that he did that?
I guess I'm just not as convinced of Islam as I am of Christianity. I guess I do think that there is more
Why not?
evidence. God, there was also I was watching a video a while ago about this moon splitting thing. I think there was also like someone. Oh God, I can't remember. It was something about how there was a natural explanation for it about there being an eclipse. Maybe you know what it was. But yeah, I think if I could try and break down why I specifically currently align with Christianity, like what my thought process is. I don't know if that'd be going off topic or if you want me to talk about that.
Well, look, I mean, ultimately, my question for you at this point is, if something that you believed were false, would you want to know?
If something I believe was false, yeah.
Yeah. Okay. And if something uncomfortable turned out to be true, would you want to know anyway?
Yeah.
Okay. So if Christianity were just essentially another cult that got popular, which is, as far as I'm concerned, that's what happens. It got picked up by the Romans, and over the course of a couple of hundred years, it went from being marginalized to being normalized to being thrust upon the entire Roman Empire, and conversions were forced as the Roman Empire spread, and then they colonized Great Britain, and then Great Britain colonized the rest of the world. I mean, do you... And essentially the same kind of pattern we observe in Islam. We observe the same kind of pattern happen in so many other minor religions outside of the 5 world religions. If it turned out that it were just another cult that had lasted a long time and gotten really popular, would you want to leave it, or would you want to stay in it?
I would want to believe what I think is true.
Yeah, okay.
And I think that, yeah, so if I could go back to what you were saying about the cults, God, I wanted to say something about it, but I think we've gone a bit off topic. I'm trying to remember what exactly the points you were making for it. Just give me a second.
Sure. I think I might have an advantage here because I'm literally like typing notes as we go, so I can remember what you're saying.
I should have been writing down stuff when you were speaking. It'd be a bit easier to keep track. But
Very helpful.
yeah, okay. So if we go back to what I was saying about the disciples, right, and being willing to die,
Yes.
I would say that one, at least if you accept what is given, like the general historical elements of the Bible, I would say that one of the elements that might separate it from like being a cult is that there was a significant transition in the character of these disciples. Because if you look at the stories prior to the crucifixion of Jesus, these people were constantly scared, constantly doubting their faith, constantly letting Jesus down. And then after the resurrection, there's a dramatic change in their character that at least demonstrates that they had a genuine belief in something changed that caused them, I think, to have a genuine change in their belief, that they honestly, truly believed that Jesus had resurrected from the dead. Now, maybe you could argue that they were deluded or brainwashed somehow, but I don't know if there's enough evidence to where you can show that, like, because I know in like certain cults it's very easy to get, well, not very easy, but like there are things that are done to the very devout followers that allows them to be brainwashed. I don't know if that same fact pattern can be applied to the disciples. If you want to explain how that could have happened, I'd be interested to hear as well. But also, I would say that just because that there are other religions that do have some elements of, or maybe like smaller cults that may not have arrived into the world in the most ideal way possible, and there is some level of manipulation. I don't think that necessarily always invalidates the claim that all religions are false. And I do think that there's still a degree of, like, I don't think you can equate everything to a cult on the same degree. Yeah.
Thank you, Gabriella. Honk honk. I think that when you say the alleged shift in character of the apostles is some kind of evidence of Christianity being true, I think, again, we can't demonstrate that these people even definitely existed. They were written about in these texts that were anonymously submitted decades after this alleged Jesus character was wandering around the Middle East. We don't even know that these people existed.
So do you believe that Jesus existed as a
These
historical
stories
person?
claim that they existed, and they claim that they went through a shift in character after having signed up to Jesus's way of life or whatever. But again, you could say the same thing for people who join, again, any other religion. You know, the number of people on here who are Muslim reverts who say, oh, after having taken the Shahada and reverting back to Islam, my life has completely changed. It's so much better to be Muslim than it was to be whatever I was before. Does that mean that Islam is true? Or is this the placebo effect?
Yeah, so wait, I could try and give an answer to that. I would say that being an atheist or not believing in God and being let's just assume for example that for hypothetically that Christianity or Catholicism is the true religion, right? Just for the sake of this, I would say that it wouldn't be entirely accurate to box the two as there's one correct belief and then everything else is a completely incorrect belief. I would say that if you assume that maybe Catholicism is the ultimate truth, like hypothetically, that all these different religions would and beliefs would fall more on a spectrum rather than a box, like a yes/no box.
Like a spectrum, sorry.
Yeah, a spectrum of truth. So any theistic belief, while not being the entire truth, would still be closer to the truth than a completely atheistic belief. And so there may be elements that you gain from being a Muslim, even if that is not an entirely correct worldview, that may explain why you may feel that your life is getting better when you revert back to Islam, for instance, even if that might not be the true religion, because you still follow a moral code that would overlap to some extent with what the true religion is. And you'd also be trying to have a connection with God. And if God really did exist, then I would think that the fact that you are trying to communicate with him and trying to develop a relationship with him, I think that would mean something. And I think that you could still develop some kind of relationship with him if you kind of see it as a spectrum rather than a yes/no dichotomy.
Sure. I think I'm more interested in like the truth of claims, though. You know what I mean? Like if someone came to me and said 2 + 2 = 5, I'd be like, well, can you give me reason to believe that? And if they said, yeah, sure, I mean, put 2 and 2 together and see what you get. And then, you know, I got 2 here, put them together, I get 1, 2, 3, 4. Oh, I didn't get 5, I got 4. I don't know why I should accept your claim over my belief. Why would I do that? They go, oh, well, you know, it's, you know, you're seeking the truth of 2 + 2 = 5 at the very least, you know, you'll get there.
Yeah, so I would say
I don't think that's particularly like useful, to be honest. Like if we zoom out from our own like upbringing and our own cognitive biases as much as we can, I think what we tend to see, and the research backs this up too, is that really our religious belief is most highly predictable based on the geographic location of our birth. And obviously that doesn't apply to everyone, but for the vast majority of religious people, before you even ask them which religion they subscribe to, if you know where they were born and where they were raised, you can predict more accurately off that information alone what it is that they believe. And a Hindu believes, like the average Hindu believes Hinduism is true just as strongly as the average Christian believes Christianity is true. Right? And the average Muslim believes that Islam is true just as strongly as the average Jewish person thinks that Judaism is true. You know, so when you're talking about, you know, these religions perhaps existing along a spectrum of truth, I'm most interested in what is actually at the very end of the spectrum, not what's like more convincing to you based on your personal experiences and the biases that you maybe haven't looked into yet and that kind of thing. I'm talking about what's actually true. Right? That's what I'm
so
interested
I think sorry, yeah. I wasn't really trying to like maybe I didn't communicate it like as clearly as I could have. Sorry. I think what I was trying to say was I was trying to respond to your point about Muslims believing that we have our personal experience and different religions are having different personal experience. I'm not trying to say that one is superior to the other, but all I'm trying to show is that there can be one true religion and that is these experiences of other religions are compatible with there being one true religion. Not that you should choose. I'm not trying. That's not trying to demonstrate that. Oh, you should. My Christian belief is the ultimate truth, but rather that that the Christian belief could be the ultimate truth, and it is not incompatible with someone from another religion having a similar experience. If you kind of see it as the spectrum, if that makes sense.
Right, but these religions typically claim to be the one true religion. So, so baked into the theology is the notion that they can't be on a spectrum of truth. It's essentially they are true or they are not.
Well, I don't think that's entirely correct. If like Islam posits that there's a God that exists, that would be correct. If they misidentified certain,
I don't know that, but
as in assuming that God is true. Sorry, like just hypothetically.
Okay.
I'm not saying it definitively, but if like we take like Christianity for example as the one true religion hypothetically, then Islam in a sense would be more correct than atheism because at least Islam posits that there exists one God.
And that's just presupposing that there's a God.
Yeah, no, but all I'm trying to show is that it's not incompatible, and that there could be, if you did assume that there was a God, that these other beliefs that people have are not incompatible, and that just because they get it not entirely correct doesn't mean that there's no validity at all to what they believe.
I mean, like religiously speaking.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah, I don't think that really helps personally, because I mean, even if you were to presuppose that there is definitely a God, we can't assume that any monotheistic religion is any more accurate in its description of that deity whatsoever. Like, if all of these monotheistic deities have in common that they are monotheistic, but they also share claims like, this deity is also all powerful and all knowing and whatever else. But it turns out that this deity is actually like not all powerful and not all knowing. What use is the fact that they have these things in common? Like the fact that there are religions that have things in common is not really helpful to me, because again, I'm not a presuppositionalist.
Yeah.
Right? Like, I understand that you want to kind of hypothetically entertain the notion that there's a God, but I'm saying, like, I'm genuinely just more interested in what's actually true. And I see no good reason to believe Christianity over Hinduism, or Islam over Scientology, or, Buddhism over Zoroastrianism or anything, right? Like, I have no good reason to believe that Superman is more likely to exist than Spider-Man. Like, it doesn't. I'm just concerned with what's actually true.
Yeah, for sure. But I think that you've raised an objection that there are different religious experiences. That all I'm trying to do is answer that specific objection. It's not like an argument for anything, because that's all I was trying to achieve with that. That specific objection does not necessarily disprove my religious worldview.
Yeah, no, I get that. But I think in the same way, someone who is a polytheist could, they could enter the chat and say, let's presuppose that there are multiple gods. Therefore, they might be a Hindu. So, let's presuppose that there are multiple gods. In that sense, Hellenism or Norse paganism are more true than Yahwism or Islam or Judaism, etc., etc. It's like, yeah, sure, if we just kind of like entertain that hypothetical, then sure, but that's not really helpful, right? Like, I'm interested in what is true, not what's like, closer to being true within any one given hypothetical that anyone could presuppose.
Okay.
Like, I don't think that, I'll put it to you this way. As far as I can tell, no one has got any data on what does and doesn't exist beyond the observable limits of this universe that we find ourselves in the middle of, right?
No one has.
We've never observed what's out there. We've never received information from what might or might not be out there. Like, we've got no idea. All we can do is speculate. Any religious person can fill that gap with their god or their gods, whereas an atheist just goes, well, I'm just not going to pretend to know what's out there. Like, it could be a deity, it could be multiple, it could be like 17 million. I have no idea. But because we have no information about what's out there, I don't see why I should jump to any conclusions.
So, okay. That sounds a bit more like you identify as an agnostic atheist, right? So you don't really actively make the claim that God doesn't exist.
Yeah, I mean, there are certain deities that I've heard people claim exist, which I don't think make logical sense. And therefore I could say that, well, that deity doesn't exist. And I can say that with like about as much confidence as I can say anything, to be honest. But, anyone can invent a deity and claim that it exists beyond the observable limits of our universe and, describe it in such a way that it's like possible. And I can't disprove it. But there's an infinitely long list of deities that could fit that criteria, right? Like, I could invent a religion right now and invent a deity at the heart of this religion, and I could describe it in such a way that no one can demonstrate that it doesn't exist.
Your flying spaghetti monster type thing.
For example.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah. So I'm not sure how exactly to respond to that. I guess I can try and go through like what my logical or like my attempted logical train of thought has been to try and reach this conclusion. Because I feel like it kind of maybe explains why I might eliminate or see something else as more likely. So I would try and start with the first question: is do I believe that there's some sort of cause or supernatural entity or existence out there? And I think then I would look at like someone like Aquinas's like his five ways, like his causal arguments or argument for motion, and I think you're kind of left with two options when you try and go back to the. I mean, I'm sure you're familiar with the argument, right? So that there has to have been a beginning or some unmoved mover, uncaused cause that started the universe. So because I think if you try and go back to where the universe started, or how everything came into being, I think there's two options. Either you have an uncaused cause that necessarily exists because that necessarily exists and does not need a cause, and it's like basically like existence itself, or you have an infinite regress. So I think those are the two options you have, and I think that there being an uncaused cause or an unmoved mover is more likely. So that's my starting point. Then maybe I'd say, okay, does this uncaused cause interact with the world, or is it more of like a Spinoza type God, which just kind of exists but doesn't interact with like the universe? Then maybe I could go to like an intelligent design argument or a fine-tuning argument, where the Earth is the only thing in the observable universe that seems to be able to support life. It's the only place where we've been able to observe life. So like a cabin, if I were to, like an analogy is that if I were to go onto an island and I saw a cabin, I would assume that has been designed because there are like clear elements of design for life to promote living, which is like the cabin. So I can make the same analogy about the Earth. If I was wondering, I mean, there are some holes in this argument, I admit, but let's say I'm traversing the universe and this is the only place that seems to be able to support life in this whole desolate wasteland. I'd say, okay, maybe there's an intelligent creator here. So, okay, and I go back to what I said about there being an unmoved mover. Sorry. I would think that to some extent that would kind of make polytheism more unlikely, because if we believe in the existence of a necessary being, there can, by definition, only be one necessary existence. Because if there were more than one necessary existence, then that would mean that one of them would need to have something that the other did not. And so they would become contingent beings rather than necessary.
That doesn't mean that they can't be the one that created this universe. I mean, like there are many mythologies that claim that there are deities that created the deities that created this world.
Yeah, but then you still kind of have like an infinite regress.
And you can't demonstrate that that's not true either, right? Like that doesn't make sense.
That what's not true? Sorry.
Like if I tell you that there is a deity that made the deity that made this universe,
yeah,
you can't demonstrate that that's not true.
Yeah, so that's what I think you kind of are. I would reject that because I think you're kind of stuck between two options when you're trying to go back to what like created the universe, like quote unquote. You can't see me, but I'm making air quotes in my hands. So you kind of you need to have an unmoved mover, and I'm open to hearing if there's another option to this, because these are the only two that I can see as being possible. Either you have an unmoved mover or you have a completely infinite regress. Like even if we take what you said, that there's a deity that created this deity, that either that deity you're saying that is constantly being created by other deities, or we will eventually reach a starting line where this deity does not need to be created by anything else. and is a necessary existence. And I don't think you can have an infinite regress into the past. That's why.
What if time is circular?
Oh, I heard this like on another live the other days. Like someone said this, and I've been trying to like think about that actually. But
That's the thing. Sorry.
yeah, so you could maybe you could like break down this like whole time is circular thing, because it's a new concept that like I've heard.
Sure. Well, it's just something that you can't demonstrate isn't true, right? Like it's another essentially unfalsifiable model, right? I think that it makes much more sense, personally, for there to be an infinite regress, because at the very least, it's consistent with the fact that we observe cause and effect to be universal.
Right.
Whereas
Yeah.
if you invoke some kind of uncaused cause, well, now you're expecting us to accept something the likes of which we've never observed before. We've never observed anything occurring without having been caused.
Yeah, I guess.
To me, even though we can't demonstrate that there is an infinite regress, it's still, in my mind, more likely, because it's more in alignment with all of these other universal laws that we observe, than there being some kind of uncaused cause. Like, in order to accept there being an uncaused cause, I'd have to completely ignore the fact that that argument relies on special pleading. It's essentially the notion that cause and effect is universal, except for in the case of this God that I'm telling you exists. Right? Like in across the entire universe, cause and effect occurs, except in this one case that supports my personal theological position.
Yeah, I would say that I think this is like really something that comes down to like personal intuitions. Like I don't think this is something that you can like just argue and convince someone of, like if you have these two things. Because to me, like just my intuition is just that as weird as it is that we have that there needs to be an uncaused cause, that still makes more sense in my head than an infinite regress of infinitely, because it like how do we get here if the past is infinitely long, or movement is infinitely long? I just cannot, it makes absolutely no sense in my head. And at least for like an uncaused cause, I can think of an analogy that kind of makes sense, like a train carriage. So each like train carriage, I don't know, no, sorry, a train, and each carriage is pulling the next carriage, but at the front we still have the train engine. And so the train engine is akin to the uncaused cause. So in my head, I can kind of conceptualize that as, okay, this kind of like, I can kind of have an understanding of how that might work. And I just cannot see it being possible. Just my own personal intuition. I can understand if yours is different, but I just cannot see infinite regress being like in any way plausible. Not that this proves Christianity is true or anything, but it gives me at least a starting point that there has to be some sort of uncaused cause that exists.
I mean, my immediate question is, why do you presuppose that the train engine is uncaused? And who built the train engine? Who built the track that the train is running on? Who created the universe within which this train was even created? And then where did that being come from? Right? So you could come up with an analogy like that, but it doesn't solve the problem that an uncaused cause requires special pleading. And you wouldn't accept special pleading in any other case, right? But a theist will often accept it in the case of the deity that they think exists. So I'm not claiming to know that there's an infinite regress, right? I'm not claiming to know that time is cyclical. I'm not claiming to know that there isn't an uncaused cause. I'm very comfortable saying I don't know how cause and effect operates exactly outside of this universe. I don't know. But what I can tell you is that it, at the very least, is less consistent with what we observe within this universe to say that there must be an uncaused cause out there. That just like how long has that uncaused cause existed for? Forever? right? Because then we're just talking about an infinite amount of time again.
Yeah, I think then...
I don't think it makes any more sense to think that there's an uncaused cause than it does to just acknowledge that outside of this universe, we don't know how much time may have passed or if there is even a beginning to it.
Yeah, I mean, I guess the theist response would be at least that God, or our definition of God, or even this uncaused cause, who I won't attribute any other characteristics to it yet, exist outside of time. I think that solves the time problem. I think that's how God is defined in Christianity and even like other religions like Islam, is that he exists outside of time. So I don't think he would be limited necessarily by that fact.
How long has God existed for?
No, but he exists outside of time, so he exists eternally across time.
I don't think it makes sense. I really don't. Like, I think that, again, it's just a shifting of the goalposts. I think it's special pleading. I don't think it solves any problem. You know, if you think that this deity exists outside of time, then it can never act either. It can never do anything, because to do something requires a change of state, and change requires passage of time from one moment to another. It doesn't solve any problem. I mean,
not.
It doesn't seem to me like you are a Gnostic theist, right? It seems to me as though you are an agnostic theist, and you acknowledge at the very least that you can't be certain that a deity exists, even the one that you believe exists, right? Correct me if I'm wrong.
Sure. Yeah, I would say that's pretty accurate.
Okay, right, and I can very much appreciate that, right? Because when people start saying things like, "Oh no, I know that my deity exists," that's when I start getting a bit more worried about them. I'm like, what do you mean? Because the evidence that you've got is as good as anyone else's, which is to say you've got not very good evidence whatsoever, but you're more confident than anyone else is, which doesn't make sense. Given that you're an agnostic theist, what's stopping you from saying, or maybe you do say this, I don't know, like, do you just acknowledge that you don't know whether there's an uncaused cause?
I would say that intuitively, an uncaused cause makes more sense, because I just cannot see infinite regress being possible in any way.
Intuitively.
And that's just my intuition.
Okay.
But I think that's how we kind of like derive everything that we know. We always start from our own intuitions, I think. And I would say that I could combine that with other reasons I have, maybe to believe in the existence of God, and that would help. Like, I think it all kind of, I don't think everything works individually. Like, maybe I have a reason to specifically believe the existence of the Christian God, maybe like miracles. And then that kind of supplements why I think there's an uncaused cause, for instance. Like, they kind of support each other, if that makes sense.
I don't think it does make sense ultimately, but I understand why you feel that it does. I mean, I used to feel that it did too, because my intuition led me to feel that way, right? But I think that this is something that is largely under-acknowledged by religious people, in my opinion, which is that our intuition is not a particularly good tool for discerning what's actually true about reality, right? If a Hindu told you what their intuition has led them to believe, you probably readily notice that doesn't mean that their beliefs are accurate, right? Like, they might go, well, intuitively, I just feel like there has to be a deity for this natural phenomenon and a different deity for this one and another deity for this natural phenomenon. Intuitively, it just makes sense to me. Like, you would probably very quickly notice that, well, that doesn't mean that that's true, though. That's just a belief that you have, which isn't really supported by anything. It's just, you don't have a better answer for why lightning strikes or why volcanoes erupt or why anything in the natural world happens. You just have this intuition that you lean on, right? But this is where science comes in. We actively try to self-correct and account for any biases that we may have previously fallen prey to, right? Like, if any other religious person said that their intuition is that their religion is true, you would immediately point that out as being faulty reasoning.
Yeah, okay, perhaps I think that's a good point. I wouldn't say I'm using intuition to justify my entire belief, though. It's just that I've come to these two options, and I haven't been given a convincing enough reason to believe that infinite regress in this manner is possible. And I see it as more of a paradox than an uncaused causa. I feel like that's probably a better, because I agree with you that if I just say I can just plead intuition for everything, and that's not the best way to go about it. But I think maybe that's a slightly better way for me to frame it, is that infinite regress seems more of an impossible paradox than an uncaused causa. And if I have to pick between the two, I would pick an uncaused causa over infinite regress.
Why do you think that it's less paradoxical to believe in an uncaused cause when we've only ever observed effects being caused by causes?
Because I don't see how we can get to this point if causality is infinite. Because by definition, it would go on forever. There'd be no, like, just even trying to like explain like the whole concept of infinity it screws with the head a bit.
Well, I could just ask you, how does an uncaused cause come about?
I would say that it would just be necessary for existence, I guess.
That's a presupposition, though, right? Like, it's kind of like if I asked you which would win in a battle of will, an immovable
Sorry.
object.
Can I just rephrase that a bit?
Sure.
I would say that because an infinite regress is impossible, there must be an uncaused cause.
Well, we don't know that infinite regress is impossible. It seems intuitively to you that it's impossible, but that doesn't mean that it is.
Yeah.
Like to me, I can say to you, well, intuitively to me, an uncaused cause just
seems impossible.
That doesn't make any sense to me either, right? And again, I'm openly acknowledging that I don't know that there's an infinite regress, in the same way that I don't know that there isn't an uncaused cause. But what I'm saying is that intuitively to me, I could present you with any other model of how things work outside of this universe too, and no one can disprove it. I could say time is cyclical. I could say that there's an infinite regress. I can say that there is an uncaused cause. I can present you with any of these and no one can disprove them because we have no access to that which is beyond the observable limits of this universe. It is pure mystery to us. And because of the speed of light, because there is a limit to the speed of light, it's not likely that we're ever going to receive data about the external environment of our universe. Right, it's probably going to remain a mystery forever. And this is where religion comes in, right? This is where cults come in, because many of us are just not comfortable accepting that there are some mysteries we will likely never, not only not get a resolution to, but there are some mysteries that we're likely never to even receive evidence on to help us progress towards a resolution. Like that, it's not that there's not likely to ever be an endpoint or an answer to the question. It's that we can't even get data to begin trying to put the puzzle together. We can't even find any of the pieces outside of this universe to put the puzzle together, right? And because people are so uncomfortable with the unknown, you can very, very easily, especially if you're a certain kind of person, you can very easily start up a cult and take advantage of scared, confused people and start telling them to follow whatever rules you tell them God wants them to follow. And sometimes that even gets recognized by a government or an empire or a kingdom as being a really effective tool of behavior control, and they get spread and they get enshrined, and and they grow over time. They become world religions instead of just little cults, right? Like think about the function of the Santa myth. It's not just good fun for kids. It's also a really easy way to make your kids do what you want them to do when they won't listen to you, right? Like I was a high school teacher for 7 years, right?
Right.
If those kids still believed in Santa, oh my God, dude, my job would have been so much easier, because I could just say, hey man, look, if you're not going to attempt this work, Santa is absolutely not going to give you presents this year. But they've grown out of that, right? They've seen through it. They've figured out that it's made up. And so I can't manipulate their behavior the way that you can manipulate children, like little children who still believe in Santa. Religions function the same way, in my opinion. I don't think that they're real. So I don't see any good reason to, like, vilify homosexual people, or I don't see any good reason to cut off a baby male's foreskin unless there's some kind of medical complication, right? I don't see any good reason to think that women shouldn't be allowed to speak with authority over men, etc., etc. There's all these rules and guidelines and perspectives that are kind of baked into these thousands of years old worldviews that I see no good reason for me to accept. All these rules that I don't think I should have to follow. I don't think that they're real. But there are many people who do believe these religions and can be manipulated because of their belief. And this is what governments have known for thousands of years.
So that's a lot to unpack. Yeah, I mean, I wouldn't entirely disagree with the notion that religion can be used to manipulate, or has been used to control people. Like, I think would be intellectually dishonest to say that, but I think it's a lot more nuanced than that, because I think you can really look at different religious groups and different people and how people arrive at a religion I would at least say that's a lot more complicated, because at least in my experience, a lot of the people the religious groups of people that have been around genuinely have this belief, and genuinely, I've been very fortunate that no one has ever imposed my beliefs on me. I think that's probably because I had half an atheist dad and half a Catholic mom, so they always wanted us to find what we believe is true. So just and even the people I interact with, no one has ever really forced that on me to believe this. They believe it because they genuinely think it's true. And I know people who have converted because they've researched, and they probably know more than me, because I think that converts are usually the people who know religion the best and have the best quote unquote faith. But these people genuinely believe it's true. They haven't got to this point because they've been manipulated into doing so. And there are a lot of people who are, in the name of religion, are living their lives and seeking to do good, and not necessarily being manipulated, I guess. Also, I saw a comment. Sorry, I saw one comment talking about how an uncaused causa, why I'm saying an uncaused causa has to be God, and I don't think that's the point of the argument. The point of just trying to say that there is an uncaused causa is to get us to a starting point. That doesn't mean that the uncaused causa is Yahweh or Allah or anything. It's just that there is something. You could be a theist and believe that God does not interact with the world at all. I think Spinoza is someone who espouses that perspective. I only know that because I had to study him in history in high school. Right. But yeah.
Where did the uncaused, how does an uncaused cause occur? Can you explain that?
Yeah, I'm still trying to, I think this is kind of what the reason that I joined this live in the first place, is to try and figure out how to think through my beliefs better.
Sure. Man, I can respect that. I can fully respect that.
Yeah, and I would say that it's just that, again, I mean, you're definitely going to disagree, but just the complete paradox of there being an infinite regress, which I just don't think is logically possible at all.
But
And I
given
know we're gonna go back and forth on this. I mean, maybe we can talk about something else, because I feel like we're gonna, like no disrespect at all, but like I feel like it's a bit of a dead end, because I think we're just gonna keep making the same points about it. So
but like personally, I don't see any inherent paradox in thinking that time is infinite, because all we've ever observed is effects being caused by causes. Whereas I see an inescapable paradox in thinking that there's an uncaused cause. Like, to me, that's entirely like self-defeating. There's no evidence that any cause has ever been uncaused.
yeah, because I think
That any effect has ever been uncaused. Like, that doesn't make any sense to me whatsoever.
yeah, I think it's because if there is an infinite regress, then that means there's an infinite amount of time between us existing and this and everything else before it. So because it's infinite, it would take an infinite amount of time of causal events before we can exist. And that would mean that we would never exist, because it's infinite. There's an infinite gap between that. I just think there has to be a start.
So this is what I'm saying is, like, given that neither of them are any more demonstrable than the other, but at least one of them is consistent with the law of cause and effect, while the other completely requires us to ignore that. Why would we think, like, they're both incomprehensible? Why would we think that the uncaused cause makes more sense? Like, you're talking before about a spectrum of, truth regarding religions.
Yeah.
Let's imagine that there's a spectrum for truth regarding how the universe came about, right? How much more in alignment with the reality that we observe right now does an infinite regress have, with regard, like, in contrast to there being an uncaused cause? Because at the very least, there being an infinite regress has in common with reality the fact that it acknowledges cause and effect, whereas presupposing an uncaused cause requires that we just ignore the special pleading implicit in that argument altogether. Like, we can't demonstrate either are true, right? And it's likely that both of them will remain unproven forever. But at least one of them is more in alignment. And therefore, in my mind, to use your analogy or your framework, it's closer to the true end of the truth spectrum than the other one is.
Yeah, I think that's an interesting point. I think definitely something I'll try and think about more. I guess what I would say is just that, and again, I'm trying to refine this and think about it more. But off the top of my head, I would say that the fact that we exist now would be evidence that, I guess, points toward there being an uncaused cause, because it would show that there is no infinite gap between, like, causal events and us existing. Because if there was an infinite chain of causal events, it would take an infinite amount of time for us to exist. I guess that's how I would conceptualize it. And because we do exist, and if there was an infinite amount of time between that and us existing, then we would never exist, because it's infinite. I don't know if that makes complete sense.
Again, unless time works cyclically, or unless, like,
But
maybe
that's a
maybe the past, present, and future all exist simultaneously, and we're just moving through time.
That's slightly different from infinite regress, though. I would say that.
Well, I'd say, look, personally, thank you, Dank. Personally, I subscribe more closely to a view somewhat like we are the universe that is experiencing itself, right? And if we are, in fact, the universe experiencing itself, then it doesn't matter that time is infinite. It doesn't matter. We're just experiencing ourselves in this current state. And it doesn't matter whether, an infinite amount of time has passed or whether an infinite amount of time will pass. It doesn't matter. We're just the universe experiencing itself anyway. Like, think about it like this. All the material that you built of, where did it come from?
What, like me? Like my cells and everything?
Yeah.
I don't know, just my parents' sperm, my dad's sperm, I guess.
And your mother's egg? Yeah. Like initially, one of your father's gametes fertilized one of your mother's gametes and created a zygote. And then it was all down to your mother at that point. She just had to keep ingesting material and digesting it so that her internal systems could fuel your zygote with enough material to keep developing. But all of that fuel that your mother was ingesting, and not only that, but all the fuel that your parents were ingesting in order for their reproductive systems to build the sperm and the egg in the first place. Anyway, all of that material that your parents had been consuming that entire time, that came from their immediate environment, right? It came from the universe, right? And then it became the gametes that combined to make the zygote that eventually developed into you. And you've been consuming material from your immediate environment your whole life too, which your digestive system has been breaking down and then using to fuel and construct and maintain and replace all of the tissues and the cells and the systems that keep you ticking over, right? All of that material you got from your immediate environment. And when you die, you're just going to decompose back into your environment again, right? You were made of your environment to begin with. You've been continuing to exist by fueling yourself with material from your environment. And then when you die, you're going to return back to your environment again. It's likely that the material that you consist of when you die will be taken up by other organisms in your environment. So you'll become like essentially food for other things that are also in this process of consuming material from their immediate environment to keep going. And there's just this endless cycle, as far as we can determine, of our environment consuming itself so that it can persist. And we can't identify any particular starting point. We can identify a point at which this universe began expanding rapidly, but we don't know what exactly is going to happen in another 13.8 billion years. We don't know what was going on 100 billion years before that initial expansion. We just have no idea. It's pure speculation. But what we can tell is that we consist of material from our environments, and we've never been separate from our environment. We're part of the environment. And when we die, we're just going to decompose back into our constituent parts again. But we're not actually going to leave. We're still going to be here. We're just going to have decomposed. So I don't see why I should believe anything other than that I am one of the ways in which this universe is experiencing itself. I think you are that too. I think you are this universe experiencing itself from just a different subjective point.
Yeah, so what your belief is that humans are just conscious constructs within the universe that are undergoing experiences, I guess.
I mean, when you say the word just, I say get that out of there, because the word just kind of undermines how amazing that is.
I'm not trying to undermine. I'm just trying to.
Sure. Like if someone were to say, oh, so you mean we're just like material experiencing reality? I'd be like, yeah, but how is that not amazing? How is that not just like an absolutely gobsmackingly interesting concept?
Oh yeah, it is a very interesting concept, I think.
And there's no undermining it either, right? Like there's nothing inaccurate about that statement. We can demonstrate every premise of that argument.
Yeah. Look, this has been a interesting conversation. Just like thank you, but I've got a essay that I've got to submit tomorrow that I've spent an hour and a half procrastinating talking to you. But yeah, but like I appreciate the conversation. Like uh, it's given me stuff to think about. Obviously, I'll try and look into rationalizing my beliefs more and more. I don't know if I covered everything that I'd hoped to, but yeah, it was good. Good to join you on this. Appreciate it.
Man, it was a total pleasure. I've loved talking to you. I honestly wish you all the best for the essay. I hope you get a great mark.
All right. Thanks, man. How do I leave the live?
Legend. Chat, let's get some love in the chat for your boy Ishan. Let's get some cowboy hat emojis up in there. Thanks so much, mate. I really do hope you have a good time with the rest of your time. That was great. I really like talking to Ishan. I obviously we disagree upon, his presupposition of there being an uncaused cause, but outside of that, I think we probably agree on a lot. Really? And I think that conversations like this, they go a long way. Mezzo, so good to see you. If you're not already following Mezzo, make sure you do. He's a lovely dude. He does lives pretty much like this one, to be fair. And he's a really nice guy. You owe it to yourself to spend a bit of time in his lives. Also, a shout out to Chris. We got to get some love in the chat for Chris. That donation's absolutely bonkers, man. Thank you so much. The link in my bio is the best way to support me. I get 100% of what you donate through there, as opposed to like roughly 40% of what you gift through here. To be very clear, I expect nothing, but I am honestly very grateful for anything you do donate. But yeah, for Chris in the chat, W Mezzo, absolutely. But please, some love for Chris in the chat too. Chris, that's extremely generous of you, man. Thank you so much. It means a ton. This little microphone here, this is an example of what your donations go towards. So what I've got here, I don't know if you can tell, but I don't have a microphone tonight. I don't know if the audio is any better or worse. I don't know, but I've got a little microphone, like a little clip-on microphone, that like I've got a little adapter for. I thought I charged it earlier. I was going to try it out tonight, but it wasn't charging. I'm on my other device too, because my last phone, where is it? Where did I put it? Here. This one here that I have been using for the last, I've been using this device here for the last, how long have I been doing this? Like 2 years? I've been using this Samsung here for the last 2 years, and it's finally died. I can't get it to charge anymore. I've driven it into the ground. I've squeezed every last drop out of it, and so I've had to move on. But your donations are literally what have gotten me this. It's what has gotten me. It's helped me to pay for the device I'm on right now. I don't spend it on anything else. I literally just use your donations to help fund this and keep it ticking over, and I can't tell you how grateful I am for that support. This means so much to me. This kind of space for this kind of conversation to happen in, this changed my life, when I was still trying to make sense of my upbringing and the religion that I'd been kind of indoctrinated into and that kind of thing. Being able to hear conversations like this, it completely changed my experience of life, and for you all to have supported me. No, thank you, Graham. For you all to have supported me so much that I can keep kind of like slowly upgrading the gear and all that kind of. I can't tell you how much it means to me. So honestly, thank you to all of you. Honestly, it's amazing to me. It's been wild, honestly, the support that I've gotten. I can hardly believe it, in all honesty. But yeah, thank you so much, everyone. Hopefully next time we'll be able to try out the new microphone. I'm optimistic. I think it'll be good. I don't necessarily want to get rid of the drumstick though. You'll notice that the mic is it is a clip-on, right? Like it does have a little. Can you see that? It does have a little clip, so I think I should be able to like clip it on to a drumstick. I'm not against all traditions, just religious traditions. I think drumstick mics they're a worthwhile tradition. I agree. It's somewhat iconic, right? Is anyone in here who was in here when I used to like use a different kitchen utensil each time? Because back in the day, I used to like every live stream, I'd use a different kitchen utensil. Like one time it'd be a pair of tongs, and then it would be like a spatula or whatever. Cosmic Cowboys in it. Yep. The fork mic was a thing for a while, actually. Yeah. This is what I mean. There's just so many OGs in the chat right now. I've been doing this for a little while now, and to have so many people just keep coming back and participating in the chat, to me is just like, that's bonkers. Yeah, Blue Tack's always been there. Blue Tack has always been a friend of the channel. Forky. They were good times. I think I had a whisk at one point as well. That was a nightmare. Getting all the Blue Tack out of that whisk was a logistical nightmare. But yeah, good times, man. That's forever ago. Tea infuser mic, yes, good time. You were here for the guitar. Jesus, man, that is forever ago. A ladle once. Hang on, there's 157 people in here. How many people in here right now have been in here since, like, what year is it? 2024? I think I must have started this in 2022. Who's been in here? I started this when they overturned Roe v. Wade. That's when I started this. Who's been in here since Roe v. Wade was overturned? Like a few of you, the guitar is why you started following. That's crazy. The lullaby of the sleeping guest. I remember that. Someone had been in the queue for so long that they've fallen asleep and we could hear them snoring, so we just played them a lullaby. That's right. Or the ASMR. We did ASMR debates for a little bit. It's like, just like this. If anyone wants to come up and try to convert me back to Christianity, now's the time, but you have to whisper the whole time. Man, there's so many of you in here who've been here for so long. This is wild to me. I'm going to get another guest up. Don't do the ASMR again. Oh, all the guest requests have gone. Once we've got another guest in the request queue, we'll bring up another one. But yeah, this is nice. Just thanking everyone for being here for so long. I don't often get to do this. The Crafty Bell says, "What made you leave teaching?" That's a great question. I'd never, in my heart of hearts, I never really wanted to be a teacher to begin with. I felt somewhat pressured into it. None of my family explicitly said, "You've got to be a teacher, mate. You need to do that, otherwise we're going to be disappointed." It was nothing like that. But Lawrence Beatty said to Brad, Brad bless. Praise be unto our Lord and Saviour, Bradley Christ. Yeah, I didn't, no one explicitly told me to, but I kind of felt since childhood that my family were kind of expecting me to be a teacher, and I was raised to be a people pleaser, essentially. And yeah, because of my people-pleasing tendencies, which I strongly encourage all of you in here who are people pleasers. I really strongly encourage you to see what you can do about that. People pleasing is not a good thing. I think because of my people pleasing tendencies, I kind of just, without really thinking that much about what I actually wanted to do with my life, I just committed to this course and I ended up teaching for 7 years. And I loved a lot of it. I really did. I loved a lot of it. Joanna's just said that it's their 1 year modversary. That's crazy. Joanna, congratulations for tomorrow. I mean, I won't be going live tomorrow, but chat, please. Some love for Joanna. You know that Joanna's been killing it in here since they started. So thank you so much, Joanna. Your commitment's been incredible, honestly. I'm so grateful. Man, it has been a long time. Just going down memory lane right now. Yeah, I think, I taught for 7 years and I loved a lot of it, but I kind of I was really struggling with a lot of it. I think my mental health was kind of going downhill after having been in there for a few years, because I really loved being a good teacher. And to be a good teacher is extremely demanding. To be a good teacher takes so much mental, emotional energy, as well as like time outside of the time that you spend at school and teaching. Like it's such a demanding job. People who remain in the profession like their whole lives, it's crazy to me, man. Like these are really special people, honestly. Yeah. So one day I kind of sat down and I did like burnout in teaching it's almost the norm, honestly. Joanna, I know you don't need it, but I mean it, mate. It really does mean a ton. Life is for sure. It's an appropriate term. It's an appropriate term. It can be somewhat cult-like, somewhat prison-like. Calling them lifers it's not inaccurate. But yeah, I got to a point where I realized like it was unsustainable for me. I kind of sat down and I actually did an ikigai on myself, right? Like, I don't know if you've heard of ikigai before, but I literally sat down, I drew up the Venn diagram, like an ikigai Venn diagram, and I just kind of went through all the things that I liked doing and that made me happy and that I think the world needed, and et cetera, et cetera. And something that kind of landed in the ikigai was psychology. Right? I love psychology. I think the world needs more psychologists. I think that, I can make enough money of it to like pay the bills. And I think that I have somewhat of a knack for it. And that's essentially what the ikigai process helps you recognize. And so I kind of redirected my energies. I'm currently doing a counseling course at the moment. I don't come on here intending to be anyone's counselor. I really don't. I don't think that would be appropriate. But that's kind of like a step in the direction that I want to be headed in long term. You know what I mean? And that was hard to do. It was really hard to do. But it feels more like my ikigai than being a high school teacher was. To anyone who is feeling a little bit kind of lost or whatever, I highly recommend looking into ikigai. I really do. Going back to school as an adult is so awesome. Man, my perspective of education has shifted so what's the word? Dramatically. Excuse me. My perspective of education has shifted so dramatically since having entered adulthood. You know what I mean? I agree with you. That's right. It says, I'm all over the place. Wonder what it would say about me. Honestly, ikigai will help you narrow it down. Mezzo, I recommend it. It's really helpful. Really helpful. It's not necessarily going to like immediately solve all your problems, but it's going to help you zero in on what is more meaningful for you. And that's a huge step in the right direction, honestly. The Crafty Bell says being a teacher shifts your perspective on what is important. Absolutely agree. I think that what I learned from being a high school teacher for 7 years, man, that's shifted my perspective on so many things. Like, what I think we should be prioritizing has been completely shifted by my time in the education system. Landstrider, that's funny. It's a Japanese word, Ikigai. Mezzo's got you right there. Thanks, chat. See, I love this chat. We just come together. Yeah, it's shifted my perspective on so many things. I think that mental health is just like wildly underestimated in its impact on how society behaves on the whole, like how humanity has evolved over the course of history. I think if we knew now what we know about the human brain, if we knew now what we know about the human brain 10,000 years ago, man, human history would be completely different. It would be completely different. I think that given what we know now about the human brain, the next like 500,000 years, they're going to be really interesting. You know, they're going to be really interesting. There's just so much more awareness of how the human brain works than there ever was before. The personal problems, the interpersonal problems, just the perceptual errors that we make. What we now understand of the human brain can just help so much. The things we believe, the things we think we know. I mean, understanding the brain is just so helpful. Mezzo says, thoughts on Boltzmann brains. What are Boltzmann's brains or Boltzmann brains? I'm not familiar with the term. You'll have to elaborate for me. Landstrider. Here we go. We'll have a quick chat to Landstrider. There's no one else in the queue, so I don't. We'll have a quick chat. That's cool. Landstrider, can you hear me?
Good morning.
Good morning. I hope you're well, man.
Oh, always. But I just was going to give you a chance to come to increase my veganism.
Sure thing. Okay, let's see.
Because I think that's really the only place where we disagree too much. I mean, not disagree, but just like have something to talk about.
Yeah, sure thing. That's okay. So, do you have like questions, or do you want to start anywhere in particular, or?
Well, no, I really like the principles. I'm trying to figure out how I can come closer to that ideal without having to give up too much of the normal cooking that I do and stuff,
Sure. I think honestly, something that really helped me was nutritionfacts.org. Or you could even just follow the nutritionfacts.org YouTube channel, which is this channel where this one doctor in particular, it basically goes through all of the research on any particular aspect of nutrition.
Yeah.
So he performs what they call meta-analyses, right? Where you take all of these studies and then you find what the aggregate findings turned out to be. So you don't have to sift through study after study after study. You can do that if you want to, but you can just get kind of like the aggregate information from all of these studies that have been done into like red meat or legumes or cruciferous vegetables or whatever. And all these other like more nuanced topics as well. But he'll give you this really thorough breakdown of what the research tells us about all of these sources of nutrition. And that helped me, honestly, really quickly find just easy to swap alternatives for the animal-derived products that I was so used to using. And then it just became a matter of swapping things out. Like where I used to lean onto things like cow flesh, I just swapped it out for things like either, mock cow meat, or I just swap it out for like beans and legumes or tofu, things like this.
Yeah, I'm finding it pretty easy to swap out like the actual red meats and proteins and stuff like that. Like we've started eating a lot more bean burritos since that last time we talked about veganism. I don't know, that's been like a month or two ago. But and I'm finding some really delicious ways to cook vegetables and stuff. But the thing I have issue with is like eggs the thing I'm having a problem, the biggest problem with is eggs and dairy. Like, you know, how do we get past? I mean, like I have no problem getting rid of like the actual flesh of the cow and all that. I do have an issue with like trying to get rid of like lard because like bacon fat, there's just no substitute for bacon fat when you're cooking like so many different things. At least I haven't found a good one that gives that same flavor that would be derived from vegetables. If you have a suggestion for that, I'm all ears. But coconut oil is the closest thing is texturally and like how it reacts while it cooks, but it imparts an entirely different flavor, obviously.
Sure. This is where I would say that veganism, like understanding what veganism is really helpful, right? Is that
Yes.
even if like I'm Just Salty is claiming, at least in the chat, that imitation bacon fat exists now, which is interesting to know. I didn't know about that. But even if that's not true, the definition of veganism is a lifestyle which seeks to avoid the exploitation and abuse of an animal insofar as is possible for the individual to do so. So if that means that you do have to give up certain flavors, to me, that's worth it, right? Because
and a lot of times we're finding that's a lot of times we're finding that's possible.
Yeah,
it just takes a minute to get used to it.
Sure thing. And look, I'd say that there's probably a way to replicate the flavor. I'm not aware of it myself. I never cooked with lard, so I never had that problem personally. It's kind of this is not an attack. It's a gross concept to me personally. But if that's something that you're used to, I fully respect that it would be difficult to, find necessarily.
There's positive and negative health arguments on both sides of that. And I find some of it compelling on both sides. That's the problem. So,
sure. I just want to respond to this comment here. MC in Melbourne says veganism is extremely unhealthy because you are eating heavily processed foods. MC, I eat fewer processed foods than I ever did before. Now that I'm a vegan, I eat far more whole foods than I ever did. So,
yeah, I would say. I'm eating all kinds of fresh veggies because I'm vegan now. I feel way better. Or tending towards veganism anyway, I should say. I'm not there yet.
No, I fully respect that. And I think like for a while there, I was calling myself a vegan and I was under the impression that I was vegan. When I was still consuming animal products, I honestly didn't really know exactly what veganism was back then. So I remember being at a work morning tea, we call them, like a brunch, and I was eating some, I think it was salami, and someone I work with, they were like, "Aren't you vegan?" I was like, "Yeah," and they're like, "But you're eating salami." I was like, "Yeah, so what?" And they're like, "It's an animal product," and I was like, "Oh, maybe I don't really know what veganism is." So I went away and I looked up the definition and I was like, oh, I was being something else. I was being something like a reducitarian, which is someone who avoids animal products when they can, like, essentially be bothered, right? I didn't realize that veganism was when you avoid whatever is possible for you to avoid that's derived from animal products. So I remember being in a similar space. The word is hypocrite, says Mezzo. Essentially, yeah.
God, yeah.
I
understand the hypocrisy of my position. Yeah, that's the problem.
And this is the thing, man, is everyone is ignorant. I'm ignorant, you're ignorant. If you're a human, you are ignorant. There's all sorts of stuff that every one of us doesn't know, right? We're all ignorant of more than we are knowledgeable of. That's just
that's the trouble. Once you know something, you can't unknow it.
Well, unless someone comes along and gives you good reason to no longer believe it, right?
Yeah, but that's a belief, and I think those are poison.
I guess we're back to epistemology now, right? Because I would say that knowledge is just a justified true belief. To take a particular approach to knowledge, anyway. I know
that's deep philosophy.
If Jay Perez is still in the chat, he's gonna put me up on that. But
yeah, I got a thought experiment for you. Like, we're close to using AI to decipher what animals are saying. So it's not going to be too long till we can talk to dolphins and shit like that in plain English. So what if they do that with a cow, and we come to find out that the cow is highly sexually aroused by the whole experience and enjoys the fuck out of it? Should we continue?
Who enjoys being slaughtered?
No, enjoys being milked. I'm talking about the slaughter. I'm talking about dairy. Like, I could totally get by with just cutting back to everything but cheese and eggs. That's the main thing. But I keep thinking about dairy farmers as these really crazy people that keep an entire species locked up, and then play with their titties to get juice that we then turn into products for our pleasure. That's an interesting way to think of dairy farmers, right?
Look, it's
but what
not
if we
untrue.
find out that the cows this whole time have been domesticating the farmers and really get off on the experience?
Look, you could reframe it in a number of ways that make it much more gross, right?
Yeah.
I think something worth understanding about the dairy industry is that it is extremely brutal. The milk that the cow produces, it's not just produced out of nowhere, right? They only begin lactating when they are pregnant, and they only continue producing milk so long as there is something taking the milk out, right? In nature, like without humans intervening, that would just be a baby calf doing that, and that's what triggers the mother to keep producing milk. It's the same way that as long as most children continue to breastfeed from their mother, typically, like if the mother is able to, typically the mother will just keep producing breast milk for like years, right? Sometimes they cut out earlier, but often, children who are breastfed for as long as they want to be breastfed, often it's the child who will stop wanting to be breastfed before the mother actually stops producing it. In the case of cows, in the case of the dairy industry, what happens is cows are forcibly impregnated, right? The sperm is essentially extracted from the male, right? They basically, they'll shove an electric, what do they call it? They'll shove like a stimulating rod up.
I think they call it a stimulating rod.
Pardon?
I think they call that the stimulator.
Maybe. I don't know. It's probably got a technical term. Anyway, they use something pardon?
I grew up on farms. You're not telling me anything I don't know. Unfortunately, I have had firsthand experiences of all these atrocities and stuff all growing up. So,
right.
But no. Keep telling everybody because I always need reinforcement of that stuff.
No, I get it.
I've seen it. Like, I grew up with it.
Yeah, and I get that too because like I got family who are dairy farmers too, right? So I'm familiar with it too. But for the benefit of the chat, people who aren't aware of this is important to understand, is that essentially we stimulate the prostate of the male whilst in many cases also stimulating the shaft to the point that they ejaculate, and then we collect that and then we forcibly insert it past the cervix of the female whilst they're being held in what's colloquially called a grape rack in the industry. At least here in Australia, that's what it's commonly called anyway, because that's what's happening. We're forcing a pregnancy, right? And then these female cows, they go through their pregnancy, they give birth, and within a couple of days, the calves are taken from the mother so that the milk can be taken by the farmer. Because if the calf is drinking all the milk, then the farmer's got no product to sell. So they remove the child from the mother. They don't like this. The cows don't like it. They cry. If you've been there for it, you know, like they're upset. They don't want you to take their children, and the children don't want to be taken from their mother.
Dude, I've walked through a veal yard before. It's heartbreaking. Oh.
It's horrific. And if they're male, typically, not all the time, obviously some are kept for breeding, but typically the young males are killed within the first few years of their life for veal. And the females are largely condemned to the same fate as their mother. They're used as essentially a milk production machine. It's also worth knowing that the modern the modern dairy cow has been selectively bred over however many centuries to produce roughly 10 times more milk than they used to produce on their own. And their physiology is not really kept up with our demand, right? Like dairy cows routinely suffer from mastitis and all kinds of deficiencies because they're hyperproductive. The number of births that they go through, it completely destroys the integrity of their pelvis. They need to have the ankles of their rear legs shackled together to hold them together because the musculature just can't support their own weight anymore. And then, you know, their lifespan is often significantly shortened because of this as well. And then they just get slaughtered for meat, maybe. You know, like it's just a horrific life of being used as a resource. You are a machine that was bred, like purpose bred by our species, and you suffer for it your entire life. And so long as you purchase dairy products, you fund that system. And I'm not interested in doing that personally.
And I think some of their behavior, and especially these domestic animals that have been with us for generations and generations, I think it's easy to explain that some of their behavior is just genetically programmed from the conditions that their previous generations had to endure. Exactly. And they're surviving the only way that they can.
That's right. Jensen Benson says, no one is making me eat meat. That's correct. That's why I'm a vegan. I could say back to you, though, that many parents do make their children eat animal products, right? Like, I've never fed my daughter an animal product, as far as I'm aware, outside of whatever accidental animal product consumption she's engaged in, like when I've not been there, like maybe at daycare or, you know, a play date or something. Maybe someone's accidentally fed her something without realizing. I don't know. I've never fed her an animal product. But if you have kids, you probably do force them to eat meat, right? They didn't ask to be born into your family, but they're on the receiving end of what's considered normal in your family, right? In the same way that if you're born in Yulan, then it's likely that you're raised to eat dog meat, especially tortured dog meat, because the more pain the dog goes through before finally dying, the sweeter the meat tastes, according to, you know, their traditions. That doesn't mean that it's okay to do that. That's just what's considered normal there. Right? So in your family, it might be...
I think is worth sharing. That's not a value that I think is worth sharing.
Right? Like, and that's the thing is, you know, if someone takes issue with these cultural norms in another place, that like, whenever I bring up something like the Yulan Dog Meat Festival or the clubbing of seals or whatever, or any other animal product derivation practice from around the globe or throughout history, typically they struggle to accept it immediately. They're like, oh, Jesus, like, why do that? It's horrific. But you got to understand, from the perspective of these other people who are born into that other culture and they've had that completely normalized to them, many of them look at those who consume, say, cow flesh. They think that is absolutely disgusting. Like Hindus look at the rest of us who consume cows and they're like, how do you think that's okay? right? So when you zoom out from your own upbringing, when you zoom out from what you have been raised to believe is normal, you start to realize, well, these people who do things that you think are horrific are just as justified as you believe you are in funding whatever animal agriculture you think is justified. And personally, I don't think any of it's ultimately necessary unless you live in like a food desert or something. And even then, I think we should be working towards providing these people with adequate nutrition by other means.
What do you
But I
think
think it's a
about
really important
eggs?
conversation. I think it is.
What do you think about eggs then? And we talked about cows. I'm like 99.9% with you there.
Sure.
What do you think about eggs? Like, there's really it's really hard to replace them in baking and cooking and stuff.
Look, honestly,
And chickens are evil. Have you ever interacted with chickens? They're pretty evil.
personally,
I mean, they kind of deserve it, and they kind of evolved with us, so.
personally, I really like chickens. I think they're sweet.
I mean, if you love on them and only eat most of their babies, is it still okay?
Look, in my opinion, no. I mean,
If you have a symbiotic relationship with your chickens, is that all right?
well, that's a question for you to answer, right? Like, personally, I don't think so. I've got a symbiotic nature with my relationship with my dogs. I don't think that justifies me slaughtering them to consume them. I also think that, like, just because a chicken's egg comes out like this big and it's got a shell around it, it's still an egg. Like, would you eat a human's egg? Like, it's part of their menstruation. Yeah. Like, in my mind, you're eating something else's menstrual products, and to me that's just kind of gross. It's also the case that the modern egg-laying chicken has also been selectively bred to produce 35 times more eggs than the red guinea fowl, which is the species that we originally bred the modern egg-laying head from, right? That intensity of selective breeding absolutely fries a chicken's internals. Like the deficiencies that the average hen-laying chicken ends up with because of how frequently they produce eggs, because we bred them to do that. I mean, most of them die much shorter than they used to die because they become deficient in like calcium and zinc and all these other vitamins and minerals. What we find is that when we take a chicken's egg and we scramble it, including the shell, importantly, Chelsea, I see you, including the shell, and when we feed it back to the chicken, which is still a bit gross when you think about it, but when we feed it back to them, their lifespans increase because we're reticulating all of that nutrition that we've bred them to be deficient in, right? So it's another example of us having bred a species to the point that it's like
that was an important
their
thing on
lifespan.
the farm growing up, is we had to make sure that we saved all the chicken shells to feed back to them. That was super important growing up.
Exactly. And if you include the inside of the egg too, it's even better for them, right? And it's gross that we would even do that in the first place, in my opinion, but that's what we did that in the first place. We're the ones that selectively bred them to essentially be deficient in all of these things.
I mean, so would it be safe to sum up a purist vegan's position that farm chickens, shouldn't exist at all?
Well, ideally, yeah.
Okay.
Again, the definition of veganism is the lifestyle which seeks to eliminate or reduce, at the very least, any exploitation or abuse of an animal insofar as is possible and practicable for the individual, right? So if I don't have to purchase eggs and therefore fund the egg industry, then it's not vegan of me to go and buy the egg anyway just because it tastes good. Because by buying the egg, I'm funding the industry. I'm funding the exploitation. right? Whereas if we stop breeding these poor things into existence, who they're frequently egg bound and they die of deficiency. Like you've only got to Google it for like a minute to see how horrific the egg industry is, right? Like it's horrible. Like the lowest rung on the karmic ladder has got to be being born back into like being a dairy cow or a chicken who lays eggs in a battery farm or something like that. Like it's horrendous.
You mean, yeah, I mean, well, this might sound crass, but yeah, you can taste all that abuse in the store-bought eggs. And you can, when you get chickens that have been raised with love and have been taken care of, you can taste that too. It's a big difference.
Look, maybe I don't know about that. I think either way, I don't need to.
You may not have first-hand experience, but I can assure you that like chickens that have had a good life, you can tell when you're partaking of their contribution to society.
Their menstrual products, yeah. Mezzo just mentioned Baraka. Man, I completely agree. If you haven't watched Baraka, I'm sure you can find it for free somewhere, either on YouTube or some streaming platform. Baraka is fantastic. I strongly recommend people watching Baraka. Really, really good movie.
Is that the one that exposes the egg industry? Or I know there's been like exposés on like almost every one of the farm industries lately.
Yeah, well, you might be thinking of Dominion there, which it's probably one of my most highly recommended documentaries of all time. Baraka's a bit different. I honestly think that the 152 people in here would think that Baraka is, by the time they finish watching it, I think they would think that it is beautiful. Baraka is such a beautiful film. Like, it is honestly amazing, but it will absolutely alter you. As Mezzo said, it will change something in you. Baraka. I strongly recommend it. But yeah, you could go watch something like Dominion, which is essentially just a compilation of hidden camera footage from within the animal agriculture industry.
So yeah, one of the dilemmas I'm facing here is I'm like trying to get a little garden farm type thing going. And you really kind of need some kind of animal for that, to turn over certain materials and to get that fertilizer, you know what I mean? And, you don't have to necessarily eat them, but, you almost got to have some kind of animal for that, to get that cycle, to get that, you know what I'm saying? To turn your little area into its own culture, permaculture. You need some kind of animal input or some kind of animal intervention to really get good plants to eat.
Well, look, even if that is true, you're right. You certainly don't have to slaughter them and consume them. That's absolutely true, right? Like, you could just take in rescue chickens for the rest of your life, or rescue cows, or rescue goats, or whatever. You don't have to be breeding new individuals into existence for this at all. It's also, to be fair, if the world went vegan, which you can't do at the drop of a hat, obviously, you have to transition towards it. That should be readily apparent to anyone who's genuinely interested in the subject matter. If the world went vegan, we wouldn't need as much land, because we wouldn't need to grow as much vegetation anyway, because of how much vegetation we currently grow just to feed it to animals, for us to then consume the animals. We actually end up, and you can look into any of the studies done by some of the like these Ivy League colleges in the US, we would end up using less land and require less vegetation to feed everyone if we went vegan, and therefore you would lead even fewer animals to
the amount of waste that we currently have in our agriculture and food system. We throw away 60% of everything is wasted, which is a compounding issue as you look down through it. Like, when you throw 60% of your meat product away, that's like a whole bunch of water and crop product that you're throwing away exponentialized. And yeah, it's ridiculous. Like we could feed everybody in the world on just a half an acre each.
It's
And we could
crazy.
have lots of small community closed loop systems so you don't have to ship everything freaking around the world.
It would be ultimately much less demanding on the planet, on sentient life forms. Absolutely. Much less pain and suffering. 100%. Strata, I've got a couple of people in the request queue.
Please.
I've loved talking to you, as always. I might move on to someone else. Oh, he's gone. Some love in the chat, please, for Strata. He's a lovely guy. I do also love that at least once every time I have Lance Strider up, he drops something that I just don't know how to respond to because it's so... Like, what was the comment about cows getting turned on by getting milked or something like that? At least once every time I have Strider up, he says something that I was not expecting. Thank you, mate. Good to have you. Before I bring up the next person, to respond to a couple of things in the chat, someone said it's not about the kind of food, it's about the population that we're trying to support. I'd say from the animal's perspective, that's not true. From the animal's perspective, they probably don't want to have their life taken from them, regardless of what the population is, right? Someone else said also it takes more land because what do they say? You would need more land for food because more people would need to eat. So you're bringing population into the conversation, which we haven't even spoken about. But to say that you would need more land for food if we were vegan, if that's what you're saying, that's untrue. And there's already been studies into this. We would need less land overall to support an entirely vegan population because of how much of what we currently grow is dedicated just for feed in animal agriculture. So if you take all of those crops that we currently grow that are dedicated animal feed and you freed up all of that land, you'd only have to use some of that land that had been freed up in order to then account for our nutritional needs if we were to all swap over to vegetation. It's very interesting. I honestly recommend looking into the studies that have been done into it. Let's have someone else up. Lordy Doty. How you doing? Hello. I feel like you have got to be one of the OGs. You've been here forever. And I don't know that we've ever spoken. Have we spoken?
No, it's my first time requesting.
Oh,
but yeah, I mean,
please, let's get some love for Lordy.
I just want to commend you on your cordiality. Like, you're just so nice to people, but you're also like, you have humility. Like, you accept when you're wrong, and that's just fantastic. That's why I continue supporting you.
Man, I can't thank you enough. You know, I try really hard, and if I'm successful in that, I'm really glad. So thanks for the feedback, mate. It's really humbling. I appreciate that.
Yeah, and so I just had a question. I have my sociology professor. He says that as people in the lower class, as that they suffer and become oppressed, that's when they lose faith, and that's when they start to become less religious. And that's like raising flags in my head. I feel like it's quite the opposite.
Yeah, I think that the opposite is often true. I think we've actually got studies that confirm the opposite in many cases. Like, religiosity tends to increase in times of great panic and strife, right? Mm-hmm. Like in times of, natural disasters, in times of war. I think there's actually like quite a bit of research into how religiosity increases. Fundamentalism especially increases in times like that. I can't give a citation, but I've read several studies that support that notion too, in fact. I'm suspicious of that too.
The most poor states in America are the most religious states, so I guess it's maybe not a causation, it's correlation, but I don't know.
Right, but I mean, we could look at the state of nations worldwide, right? Like those with the less economic disparity between the classes are the more secular nations, and those with the greater disparity are the more heavily religious. Like these are often theocracies, even. So the data, in my mind, seems to suggest the opposite of what your sociology.
Yeah, I'm gonna.
I don't know.
What's great is that he has a assignment that's like, you can disagree with one of my lectures and write 2 pages about it. So that's what I'm gonna be doing.
I think that is a great idea. I think that's a really good choice.
And I had another question that you mentioned earlier in the live. You said that knowledge is a justified true belief.
Oh, look, more or less, yeah. It's
Yeah.
it's a starting point.
I was thinking, like, is the difference between subjectivity and objectivity just that? Like, I don't know if anything can be truly objective.
Man, that's a really good question. I think that when it comes to objectivity, as far as I understand it, it's only really ever something that we can pursue, right? Hey, thank you so much. It's like pursuing something like perfection. You know, it's not necessarily something you can ever attain. Like you can pursue the goal of being, creating the perfect drawing or the perfect painting or something, or you can try to be the perfect teacher or the perfect doctor or something like that. And, you know, by definition, you're never going to reach that point because there's always some way in which you could be better or improve, right? As far as I understand, objective truth is a bit like that. Like you can pursue it, but the more you learn, the more questions get raised along the way, as far as we've been able to tell so far. And so we can never know what is objectively true across the board. I think when people learn this kind of thing, it's typically where they start to develop a particular interest in things like mathematics, because mathematics is a little bit more consistent, right? It's a little bit more
defined.
That's a great term for it. It's a little more clearly defined, right? Like what tends to be provable mathematically, it seems to be a lot more like enduring, that kind of thing. But objective truth on the whole, like, you know, is this a simulation or not? What is it okay to unalive people or not? Like that kind of thing. Yeah. Like what is objectively true about ethics and just the physical universe, all that kind of thing. Yeah, when we're talking about truth, I think typically we go with things that are justified, meaning that there's as best we can get one, there's a sound argument that can be made in support of the conclusion, and that's as best as we can get.
Yep, I agree, and I'm right there with you. I don't have any other questions, but man, it was so good talking to you. So
honestly, I'm so glad to have you up. I know you've been in here for such a long time, so it's great to just put a voice to the DP.
Yeah. All right, have a good one, Daniel. Thank you.
You too. Take care. Chat, please. Some love for you, boy Lordy. It's so nice to talk to people like that who I know have been in here forever, but that I've never heard the voice of. So thanks for coming up, Lordy. Grenangle, how you doing?
Hey, mate, how are you?
I'm good, man. I love when you come up. What's on your mind?
Mate, there was so many things on my mind, but you keep chatting about things and pushing them out.
My bad, dude. I should slow down.
No, it's not your fault. It's just the way things go. I didn't know you're a vegan. You're a vegan, is that true?
I've been as vegan as I can be for the last 6 years, yeah.
Okay. I don't have a problem with that at all. I think that's a moral. You're a moral vegan, I'm guessing, or a health vegan?
Well, by definition, veganism is a moral stance. People can go plants-based for health reasons, but by definition, veganism is a moral stance. Yeah.
Yeah, I don't have I'm definitely somebody that does his own business. Like when it comes to animals, I don't want to say it like a a lot of people want to be like, you can't be a man. I don't want to be that guy, but I think you should do it with respect. Like I do prefer to raise animals with respect, treat them well. I don't like factory farming. I don't like that kind of stuff. Like it's horrible. What's going on at the moment? Like, I have raised pigs and put those pigs down and eaten those pigs. They had good lives, but they had a different life than pigs in farms.
Yes.
I wouldn't even call them farms. Like, it's not even fair to call them farms, and that's horrible. It is horrible, and I think we should have a good hard look at that. I have no problem with having it. And I think the taste is different.
I agree. The 26 years of my life that I consumed animal products, I think I noticed a difference as well, I think my perspective on this is that from the perspective of the animal, it doesn't really matter how nicely they were raised. They still had their life taken from them, right?
Oh, well, you're going to do that, but I mean...
Yeah. I used to slaughter my own animals too.
Oh, right. You grew up did you grow up on the farm, Daniel?
I didn't grow up on a farm, no, but when I partnered up with my now wife, we used to slaughter the animals that we raised on her father's property and consume them.
Okay, I'm not talking to an idiot then. That's not. Because it's a different thing, like you've got to face it. And a lot of people don't. Like, they'll just buy their products wrapped in plastic and, and it's... you've got to, I think you have to face it, or you should have your kids there. Like, I always make sure I took my kids along to the farm. This is the way life is. Like, and it's not, life isn't binary. Life isn't, it's not always good. We try to make it as good as we want, but there are some nasty bits in it, and that's a nasty bit, and taking the chicken, I wish we could live properly. I wish there weren't 8 billion people on the planet needing food.
Well, to be fair, I mean, again, as far as our best models can demonstrate, we can support that many people on plants. We just don't, because the systems haven't been set up effectively enough yet. I think, like, again, from a vegan's perspective, it just comes down to the animal's right to their own life, right? Like, it's not necessary for me to slaughter an animal in order for me to survive.
But I also do pest control, Daniel.
Yep.
I don't know if you've been involved in anything like that. And I don't want to get confrontational about this, because I know it's a difficult thing for a lot of people to handle.
It's okay.
Sometimes some animals, there's too many of them, and you got to cull them. and I find it very, I must admit, as a young bloke learning, I found it very difficult to come to terms with that kind of thing. But you do it, and you don't lose respect. Like, I was very lucky that I had people with me that were kind of nice, and I have met not nice people that take pleasure. Like, I'll tell you a story that really freaked me out, Daniel. And now, I wasn't there. This is an anecdote that I heard, but I had worked there. It was a abattoir in the Gippsland region. I don't know where you live, but you know Gippsland?
Yeah, I'm not far from Gippsland, yeah.
Okay. A mate of mine was working there, and a couple of guys went to work there, and these guys revelled in the act of death, and they revelled in it. And there was probably, I think there's probably half a dozen, maybe 20 people working there, and it freaked them out. And these are people that have worked in that sort of environment all their life, but the fact these two people turned up and just took pleasure, and just, reveled in it. They weren't happy. They weren't happy at all. And they had to get rid of them. Like, get these people out of here. There's something wrong. This isn't right. And they got, do you understand what I'm talking about?
Oh, I'm familiar with the type. When I was still a teacher, there was a video that began circulating amongst the kids. A couple of where I live and work, hunting's really popular, right?
Yeah.
A lot of families have got hunting dogs, all this kind of thing. One of these kids, a group of these kids, had gone out on a hunting trip one weekend, and they'd gone out with their dog, and they filmed themselves nailing the dog a couple of feet up off the ground onto a tree.
Now we're getting, you're gone far beyond anything I just talked about, but it's on the same thing, yeah.
Well, this is the thing, right? Thinker in the house. Good morning, my friends. This is the thing, right? Like there are many people who would say, well, I mean, like if we talk about the Yulan Dog Festival, right? Yeah. This is held every year by a group of people that believe the more torture the dog goes through.
Oh, they want the adrenaline in the meat. That's a belief they have.
Honk honk, thinker. Thank you very much, you silly goose. That's right. They believe that the more torture the animal has gone through, the sweeter the meat ends up being. And in their mind, it's fine for them to do that.
Yeah, well,
there is
a line, Daniel. There's a line. And this comes down to subjective and objective morals. We're having the conversation right bloody now, mate.
Exactly, yeah.
That's exactly what we're doing. There's a line. I don't know exactly where it is, but you and I would probably be in a fair amount of agreement when you're beyond it.
Look, probably, right? And the reality is that, we don't ultimately get to choose where our line is. Our line is shifted in accordance with the conversations we've had, right? The evidence we've been exposed to, the ideas that we've processed. So my line used to be in a different place, right? I had no real problem funding everything that I used to fund, doing everything that I used to do. But then people presented me with new ideas, with new information to me, with I had conversations that I hadn't had before, right? And so my line moved.
Yep.
And I ended up no longer feeling as though I could justify funding the exploitation and abuse of animals that I came to realize I didn't need to. Right? Like, it's not necessary for me to consume animal products. But by consuming animal products, I'm actively funding the exploitation and abuse of those animals.
I try to avoid that as much as I can. If I think, I do actually, like, you don't have to believe me, it doesn't matter. But I do try to avoid, like, Woolworths pigs, Coles pigs, because I know the farming practices of pigs particularly, and battery chickens. It's a little bit ordinary.
It's barbaric. It's horrendous, right? Like, you wouldn't wish it on your worst enemy. It's just crazy stuff, right? And I think.
But I have worked in primary production.
Sure.
A lot of it, and you deal with DEATH. It's the thing you do, and you just got to deal. Like, you do it. The decent people do it decently.
Well, this is the
and
thing,
most
right?
people are decent.
That's the thing, right? Is someone could say, grape is a perfectly natural phenomenon, because it is.
No, I don't think you could do. I don't think you could do that decently.
That's the thing.
I can't think of a way you could do it.
But that's the thing, is I agree with you, right? But it's perfectly natural to grape. Grape is a natural behaviour.
No, that's a naturalistic fallacy. I'm not going to fall into that.
Exactly, that's the point, right? Like, it's perfectly natural to unalive other animals.
Yeah, I'm trying my hardest not to fall into that one, Daniel.
Exactly, and if we say things like, well, it's perfectly natural for people to grape. So as long as you find a way to do it more humanely than these other grapists are doing it, well, at least you're not doing it so badly, right?
You're going to have to. Well, like I said before, what about pest reduction?
Yeah. Well, this is an interesting
It's
conversation.
difficult. It's difficult. Like where you see yourself as a custodian. Now you could just go, okay, it's all natural, I'll let it go, and just let whatever's going to happen, and that might not necessarily be a good outcome.
And this is the thing, right? Like from the perspective of the rest of the natural world, there are way too many humans.
Absolutely.
And so this is one of the ways that I contextualize all of my behaviors as best as I can is, on the whole, how much...
I bet you're not talking about culling them though, are you?
Culling humans?
Yeah.
I certainly don't think that we need to breed as many of them into existence as we do. That's for sure.
Yeah, but you're not going to cull them.
No, I don't think we should cull humans. No, definitely not.
No. I'll be facetious.
No. I respect your position. I didn't feel like you were accusing me of that either. But the point I'm getting at is that something that I like. One of the lenses that I try to look at, I try to look through as often as possible, is how much unnecessary pain and suffering are my actions causing, right? And so,
absolutely.
And given that it's not necessary for me to consume animal products. It's not necessary for me to do that. Plus, the consumption of animal products necessitates the pain and suffering of innocent animals. I avoid that. In the same way that, if I can find a way... Pardon?
The word innocent, I'm sorry, but it's just the word innocent. I don't know why you have to use it. But,
Sure.
They're just animals.
Well, so are we, right?
Yeah, absolutely. We're neither innocent nor guilty.
Well,
you're being religious.
I don't necessarily think that it's true that we could say that no one's responsible for anything, because I think that cause and effect would dictate that we are responsible for the things that we do. But that's the thing, right? As a vegan, excuse me, as a vegan myself, I don't think that it's I don't think that I can say that the people who facilitate the Yule and Dog Meat Festival every year are objectively immoral. I don't think that's how morality works. These people were raised in that environment to believe that is not only acceptable, but it's like a great thing to do.
You realise that's a very small amount of people in China.
It doesn't matter. To those people,
yeah, but it's not the whole of China. You realise that,
no, I understand that. Yeah. It's and you could say the same about the people in Finland who club seals.
Yep. No, you're good.
You know what I mean?
You're good.
The size of the community is ultimately irrelevant. It's what is considered normal / moral by that community. Whether they're 1,000 strong or 1,000,000 strong or 100.
I hate to do this to you, Daniel. I hate to do this to you because I'm doing it to myself. But what about where it crosses over into indigenous practices?
Sure thing. I think that a practice being traditional does not make it moral, right? We can talk about, the Indigenous Australians, for example, like the First Nations people of Australia. It's traditional to prohibit the playing of the didgeridoo by females, right?
Absolutely. There's a big one. That's good point.
I don't think that's right. I could go a little more extreme, right? I could say that, it's considered traditional in much of the Muslim world to perform...
sorry, I didn't mean to talk over you.
That's okay. I was only going to say it's considered traditional in much of the Muslim world to perform female genital mutilation on young girls. You know, something being considered traditional does not mean that it is moral.
It's pretty tough, isn't it?
Morality is complex, you know.
It's not easy.
Right. And this is where philosophy becomes so important. You know, the fact that we don't teach even introductory philosophy as a core subject in high schools, it blows my mind. Is if we did, I think there would be a lot more understanding.
Oh, sorry, I talked over you. I was really sad tonight that learned that you'd walked away from teaching.
Man, it's heavy. It's anyone who stays in there for longer than like even. I was proud of myself for lasting longer than like 5 years.
How long did you go, mate?
I was in there for 7 years. I left I left last year. Yeah.
Yeah, my wife's been doing it for 10.
Man, it's amazing.
And she's talking about reducing hours. Like she went right up. She's writing HSC stuff and like she went right up, but she's a high achiever. But man, it's really hurt her more than I've ever seen any damage. She's done so many things since I've known her, and I've never seen anything take so much from somebody.
It's wild. It's crazy.
Like it really took so much of her.
I think in my whole life I've had something like 15 or 16 different jobs. I'm 31 now. I've had like a few jobs, you know, and nothing compares to teaching in terms of what it demands of you. Like it's
like when I met her, like it was in 1988. She was working for Better Homes and Gardens. She was a graphic designer. And she was an artist, and that was before computers. So she had a little toolbox with scalpels, and you know, it's really weird. Like you wouldn't even understand it now, you know, like light boxes and It was an old school world making magazines.
How things changed.
She had this crazy, and she was an artist. She was an artist, and then you know then we had the first baby, and when she went back, computers were a thing. So she had to learn all these computers. And she goes, oh, this is boring now. And she's always done different things. She made stuff she went and worked for Australia Opera. She went and did all this crazy stuff. But she ended up being a teacher. And I've never seen anything sap so much out of somebody. Like she came home from doing her first practical, and she said, have you got any beer? She'd never done that before in her life, mate. Like, I'm the alcoholic.
I encourage anyone who has ever criticised anyone in the teaching profession to go and be a teacher for 2 weeks and see how you go. It's wild.
But she loved it, and she's got students from 10 years ago still calling her that are out there in the world.
If you can tough it out and you can you know establish yourself as a person of influence in these young people's lives, I mean it's extremely rewarding. You know,
it's just so sad. I just feel so sad, and I heard it. It just my heart's a bit broken. You know, like it breaks my heart.
Look, I guess if it makes you feel any better, I guess I'm kind of teaching stuff on here in a way. I don't know.
It's bloody internet, mate. We're all bloody. It's a bloody wank. Nah. I wish I could tell you that was true, but I don't think it is.
You never know, man. I get a lot of DMs, and I get people jump in the chat and tell me that, you know, the conversations that they've tuned into here have helped them in one way or another. So I think that
we
these
might be helping
conversations do
Americans.
influence people. You know, they do influence people.
We're helping Americans, maybe.
Maybe, who knows, man? I don't know.
Anyway, look, I think we've got to the end of this one. You're a really nice guy. I really like knowing you. You're a Melbourne boy?
You know it. Outer Eastern.
I'm originally from South Gippsland. I'm up in Sydney now.
There you go. So, look, we're from pretty much the same neck of the woods, really. I'm out of Eastern suburb. Anyway, so I used to go down to South Gippsland for holidays all the time.
Yeah. So you don't have to eat meat. You might talk me into that one day. I think you might. You've got a strong argument.
I
But,
can't move that line. I can't move that line for you. You know, it's honestly just you reflecting on your own beliefs and being honest with yourself regarding how much you really believe them. That's
But
what ends up.
I can still look a cow in the eye and go, I'm going to eat you. And I
Yeah.
know that sounds horrible, but I can.
No, I understand. You're not the only one, you know.
I can't do it to you. You should be glad about that.
I mean, I am. I'm glad that you wouldn't hurt me for my tasty flesh.
And that even goes for, I've never even looked at a magger and thought I'll eat them. I would.
Yeah, and that's the thing is, you know, you feel that way despite the fact that there are so many people who feel differently to you, right? Everyone's line is different because of the accumulative sum of their experiences up until the present moment. You know, and the things that you will go through in the near future, even the distant future, they will continue to influence you in this way or that way, and we ultimately can't help it. Our lines.
You know any
shift.
Buddhists? You remind me of a Buddhist a bit.
I probably would have identified as a Buddhist for a little while back in the day.
Yeah.
But I'm not a Buddhist. No, I don't subscribe to all of their teachings. I think that the what are they? The Four Noble Truths and the Eightfold Path. I think that they're a pretty. You could do a lot worse. That's for sure.
I think I'd change them more than they changed me, to be honest.
Maybe. You'd have to ask them, right?
Oh, well, I have. You wouldn't believe it, but I'll tell you that another day.
I look forward to it, Grenade. It's always a pleasure, mate.
No, you're a good fella. All right, you have a good night.
All the best, mate. All the best. Let's get some love for Grenangle. As always, a riveting experience. Tonight's been lovely. Tonight's been a real grab bag of different kinds of conversations. What do you know? But that's what tends to happen. Honestly, I'm open to it. It's cool with me. I'm so grateful to have had all of you for so long. I've got to go. I've got to go get some sleep. But honk, Chet, you're an absolute brother. Thank you so much. Look at that guy. They're so cute. Thank you so much for being here. All 180 of you. You're a bunch of legends. You're my favorite chat. You are my favorite chat. I hope to see you ASAP. Again, next time. Oh, well, thank you kindly. I'm going to ski her. Next time, hopefully, I can get my new microphone hooked up and we can see how good that is. I don't know how good it'll be. I hope it's really good. Hopefully, I can get my Canvas account to work properly so I can fix up my background as well. Thank you in the chat, Ominous. All hail. That's correct. Don't forget it. I'm joking. Thank you so much to anyone who's gifted or subscribed. An extra special shout out to anyone who donated, especially Chris tonight. Thank you so much. Honestly, it means a ton. I can't tell you how helpful it is. It really is. Until the next time, if you're not already following, please follow. I have an alt account as well, which is really helpful if you follow as well. Thank you, Joanna, for pinning it. Send me a DM if you want. I generally have time to respond to them, even if it takes me a bit of time. But thank you so much for being here. You know, your time here now in this shared experience that we know we have, it is so important. It is so valuable. This life, this experience, it's all that we know we have. We might have some kind of afterlife after this. I can't prove that we won't. But thank you, Mezzo. I can't prove that there won't be an afterlife, but I see no, honestly, compelling evidence that there will be one. When I think of where I came from initially, when I think of that non-experience that I emerged from, once my nervous system developed to a sufficient degree of complexity and I started forming memories and an identity, etc. Before any of that, there was just this non-experience. It was like being asleep and never having dreamt. I think it's most likely that that is what we will return to when this body dies and our brain ceases to generate the consciousness that you're in the middle of experiencing right now. I really do hope that you treat the time between now and that point as though it's all you might have. I hope that you explore reality as keenly as you can. I hope that you lead with empathy. I hope that you are patient when it benefits you and when it will help others. I hope that you learn to stand up for yourself and not take any shit when you shouldn't. I hope that you learn as many fascinating and inspiring things as possible. I hope that you try new things. I hope that you look your fears in the eyes and just walk right through them anyway. So long as you're not endangering your life. I hope that you put down books that you're not interested in. If they're not gripping you halfway, just go get another one. I hope that you let yourself indulge in your favorite desserts. I hope that you take the time to question your beliefs. I hope that you get a good sleep. Get a sleep. I just hope that you have a good time. I hope you have a good experience. I hope it's rich. I hope it's deep. I hope you soak up as much as you can soak up between now and when it all fades back out to black. Thank you for sharing some of it with me and us. Thank you, chat, for being here. You're a bunch of legends. I'm so grateful for every one of you. We've cracked 80k likes. It's been a great time. I love you all. I'll see you soon. Daniel out.